Let's start off with the introduction. For the people that don't know who we're having this conversation with today, his name is CHK Death. He is one of probably the most old school member of the community that we've had on this show, and we'll go over kind of what the goals of this particular show will be. But Death has been playing CPM from as far as I can remember, and has been a part of Team Chatkill, which was a North American, I guess, is a North American Quake team since forever. He's been CHK Death for as long as I've known him. He's always been a very good player, always had very strong aim, and has always just somehow managed to kind of, if not be playing at the very highest levels, be constantly playing with and against the people that are at the very highest levels. They seem to kind of accept him when they're playing, in their pickup games or their scrims, and he finds a way to kind of be challenging these guys, which, a lot of people don't get the chance to. He doesn't have, a particularly long history of winning tournaments. I don't think that's particularly important, and we'll discuss that why. But I think he has been an important member of the community, at least in North America, for a long period of time, and has now become kind of a staple of the North American Quake Champions community through his stream, which is probably the biggest stream outside of Dehang and Rafa in North America, so that's really interesting. What else has he done? Have you been to any QuakeCons, Death?
I've never been to QuakeCon, and that's
Okay.
actually on my bucket list.
So that's the kind of person who Death is. He's always been a very pleasant person, never been a toxic person as far as I can remember. I can't ever remember him being a dick. He's always kind of faded in and out of the CPM community after like 2003, after Wansanity, and he's always kind of come in with a relatively high pedigree as far as is concerned. So that's who I think, or what my perspective of you is, Death. So right, welcome to the show. Please feel free to introduce yourself, and after that's done, I'll kind of give you a rundown of what we'll try to do and what you think about it, and see what threads kind of come up naturally in terms of conversation.
Sure, sure. And your introduction, thank you very much for your introduction. It's very kind.
Hey, you're
And
welcome.
it pretty much sums up my history as far as Quake 3 and Quake CPM goes. I would say, you know, I played Quake 3 for many years before playing CPMA, primarily Rocket Arena 3. And I up until playing Pro Mode, my Quake um experience had been in a casual, fun, fragtastic kind of way. I did compete in RA3, but it wasn't until playing Pro Mode that I started to really become exposed to and started to see some of the real high level play that was being played in Quake. Players like Gradius, players like Chaotix from Dark Side, players like Rat in Europe and Aphelion, and some OSP players other than Chaotix. There were OSP players playing Pro Mode, and so I got to really play against some really smart guys, some really capable players. I also, because of CPMA, I got into OSP, which is something, the leader of Chatkill X Factor, he wanted us to branch out into more competitive Quake 3 modes. So we played not only Pro Mode, but we played OSP, we played OSP CTF. And so I was exposed to a lot of high level Quake play, not only in Pro Mode, but OSP CTF, OSP TDM, a little bit of OSP Duel, although I didn't really enjoy VQ3 Duel too much since it was very slow to me. But I credit CPMA with opening the floodgates for me, to really get better, um, and to really take me from just some sort of casual, fuck around type of RA3 player to a better, a more competitive player, a more I felt like um, uh, I was extracting more from Quake than I was before I played CPMA. Started that journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because I had a very similar experience, and I think it has to do with how jarring the movement is. Like, it's just so alien that when you first see somebody really good at it, you almost kind of get nauseous. And that's when I realized, wow, okay, so people aren't just kind of moving their mouses like randomly, because strafe jumping is really hard to see, I think, especially when you're like super young. Like, it seems like it's like super convoluted and complicated, and you can't really see the player doing. But I think bunny hopping is just something you can visually see easily, and that's you get to appreciate the skill a lot more. Uh,
Absolutely.
I guess, what were your early impressions, or I guess memories, of the early CPM and Quake communities like? Because we touched on toxicity, at the start of this, and this was a period where things were a lot more toxic, or being toxic was just kind of completely okay, from what I remember. Like, people always seemed to be like dicks to each other, and that's just how people were. Um, what do you remember? I guess good, bad, and ugly.
Well, um, my memories of the toxicity in CPM specifically were it wasn't that it was necessarily acceptable to be toxic, but there were actually specific toxic players and groups of players. Um and
By the way, no one's listens to this, so I advise, please always drop names. No one's ever gonna know. As
oh
many,
yeah.
like, don't
oh
worry,
I,
we're
I
gonna get to Quake Champions. We're gonna get to some real name dropping then.
Oh yeah. Well, so I mean, and one of the most toxic players that I used to play against a lot in CPM, and you know who exactly I'm talking about.
I already had his name
Um,
written down in my notes, so yeah.
Devious.
Yeah.
Devious was a player that came from Quake World. He started playing CPM, and the interesting about him was he was a player who never truly embraced Promode movement. He actually played CPMA. He moved in pro mode as if it was Quake World, and it was actually very interesting. It was very funny to watch him play, because he was very aim heavy, very hit scan heavy, but he couldn't move, and so he played this style that was in itself was toxic,
Lol.
and then his attitude was also toxic, and he
Talk.
was he the interesting thing about it is that for me there wasn't a lot of toxicity in the community except for this one guy and the people he surrounded him with,
Yeah,
and that's
Wooged.
kind of where the yeah, with Wooged, and which was his clan, and that's where the toxicity, a lot of the toxicity kind of came from. But that being said, I think there's always been an element of Quake in that it's a game where the better player wins, and it's very competitive, and people there is an element of I just dominated you, I just raped you, I just owned you. um and if you don't have the right perspective, then you can easily lash out. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten frustrated losing to a player. And you have to learn as a Quake player that when someone's better than you and you lose to them, okay, what do I need to do to get better? And when I was younger, that's not something that I really understood. And so it was
Yeah.
easy to lash out and say, fuck you, or you play like a pussy, or whatever the situation is. It's very easy to lash out. And so I think a lot of the older Quake players were better at taking those losses and moving on, whereas a lot of the younger players, like myself, because I was in college or just getting into college,
Yeah.
when I was playing Quake. So, wasn't exactly mature, but I wasn't toxic. Like, you lash out every now and then, but I didn't have I certainly didn't have a reputation for it like a guy like Devious and the people who surrounded him. So, um, I think that's part of the toxicity, is that competitive aspect. But there were specific examples of toxicity that were, focused on specific people in that time, I would say.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that with respect to Quake being such a competitive game, that element, that kind of backlash that you see from players is the same drive that forces them to want to get better. It's just the opposite side of it, I think. Like, when you don't hit the reward, when you don't kind of achieve the goal, it's that kind you're frustrated and you lash out because it's that same drive that makes you want to win. So maybe it's just inevitable that in a game like Quake that is very competitive, where it's also very anonymous. I think that's a big part of it as well. Because I think if it was competitive and it was in person, like people aren't as like when you play sports with people, they're not toxic in the same-ish way. I don't. I think when you can do it behind a monitor, and it's very the toxicity is a lot more accessible. But there was also something interesting you mentioned that made me think of something that I was thinking of the other day. That in the past, when people played like slower modes, like it was acceptable for people to lash out at them. Not slower modes, but to play a slower style. Like you mentioned something about Devious having a toxic style. In the VQ3 community, when people were camping, like stopping in the middle of a 15-minute game and just kind of typing as much as you can because this person refuses to play, that was a way of kind of refereeing the community into a particular style, a particular non-toxic style. To okay, we need to constantly engage one another because it was so hard to aim back then.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually touch, and it was interesting with Devious as well how far his toxicity would spread because it's not like it would just be in the game. It would be in IRC, it would be in the forums, and like some of the saved CHTV pages still have a lot of his comments there. And when you look at it, like this guy was just mean to everybody, and I don't know why, but yeah, that's just how it was. How did Chat Kill start? Do you remember? Or were you there, or how did you get into Chat Kill? Because as far as I've known you, you've always been in Chat Kill. Chakil is
So
CHK,
yeah,
the
so
acronym.
I don't have the history on Chat Kill, but what I do know about Chat Kill is that Chat Kill started in Rocket Arena 3.
Did you join
Um,
them in the Rocket Arena 3?
I did not. I joined them in CPMA, and it's actually funny. So I started playing CPMA because of Rocket Arena. Um, you may not know this, but way back in the day, Rocket Arena 3 had gone through a period of not receiving any updates for many, many years.
Yeah.
It got to the Rocket Arena 3's the mod was based on 1.16 point release up until 2000, maybe 2005, 2006. So the mode itself was unpatched, and the creator of the mode had basically all but abandoned the project and wouldn't allow anyone to take it on. And so there was a period in Rocket Arena 3. So there was a period in Rocket Arena 3 where OSP and CPMA had made huge advancements in features and netcode and several things. And the RA3 community had gotten so fed up that we once CPMA Archon had actually implemented um, he had implemented the ability to play RA3 arena maps,
Yeah.
right? Because RA3 maps had um, the way RA3 maps were built was that you had several maps inside an RA3 map,
Yeah,
so
every
you
map
could
was like an
play
arena map. And
right,
an arena map contained multiple maps inside it which had their own unique queues.
right. So you had the larger map for 4v4, 5v5, or 6v6 or whatever, and then you had the smaller arenas for duels. And at some point, Archon, I'm not sure if it was Archon, but CPMA had implemented the ability to use these arena maps. And when that happened, you had people playing the RA3 rule set, so which is is similar to Clan Arena.
Yeah.
You had
Well, it is Clan Arena basically, right?
it's basically Clan Arena, and you had players playing RA3 rule sets in pro mode. And after a while, there were actually some competitions that were using CPMA for RA3 competitions, and that's actually how I got exposed to CPMA, playing the RA3 rule set.
Were people still
And
playing it in the VQ3? When you say RA3Q, you mean specifically the VQ3 movement as well, and damage and weapons and
VQ3
stuff.
movement, yes.
Okay, understood.
VQ3 movement, VQ3 damage with
But it was just played inside
CPMA.
the CPMA mod, not the CPM gameplay.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
understood.
And then playing CPMA with the RA3 rule set, I was exposed to the Promode rule set, and then once I saw it and once I started playing it, I basically went full on with Promode.
What was the initial thing that attracted you to Promode? Did you start playing the game and you kind of discovered the mechanics, or was there a particular eureka moment where you're watching somebody play and you're like, oh wow, holy shit, this is possible, I had no idea.
It's a combination of watching people play. Um, I think I had seen some Challenge TV competition, I believe. I'd seen some players play, and I was really drawn to the movement. I've always been a player that's been attracted to movement. And when I saw kind of Quake Unleashed with Pro Mode, I was drawn. I was like, okay, I got to learn that. Like this game mode here is the culmination of just pure skill, mechanical skill. I was really drawn to mechanical skill and mechanical ability more so than the cerebral elements of Quake, which looking back on it now, I think was a bad thing for me, um, as far as becoming a complete player. But at the time, I was more attracted to these pure mechanical elements of movement and aim. And seeing Pro Mode played at the highest level, I was like, okay, this is something I have to play. This is fast paced. It's who's the better mechanical player is generally going to win. It's heavy on the frags. This is a game mode I want to play, and that's what drew me into it.
The mechanical aspect, what do you think of this kind of distinction now? I guess looking back, thinking of it now between the mechanical and the cerebral side of Quake. What do you think is more important? What do you think is more important in CPM? Um, and how do you get better at the cerebral? Because the cerebral side sometimes seems kind of difficult to capture. So when you said earlier, it's like, oh, I think it was to my detriment to become a complete player. How how would you how would be how would you exercise that? I guess, Michael, because with the mechanical skill, I think it's easy. I think I can see it's easy why you may have been attracted to it, because maybe it was just more fun at the time as well. But the cerebral side of Quake, I'm a person who's a little bit more skeptical with respect to the depth of the how cerebral Quake is. In fact, I've been called as somebody who kind of oversimplifies Quake. What did Brandon say? He said I reduced Quake too far. I think Quake is a relatively simple game, and I don't really think there's too much depth outside of it being a human versus human kind of encounter, which you can find in a lot of other games as well. So I guess I have two questions. How would you Do you agree with this assessment? If not, why do you think Quake is a particularly cerebral game? Um, and if you do, and I guess my second point would be is how do you exercise this? How do you make it better? Because it seems like some players try forever and it just never clicks.
Yeah, so I think I want to clarify what I meant by cerebral. So
Okay, sorry.
I I I don't I'm not necessarily of the perspective that that Quake requires some insane level of cerebral play to
Yeah,
be effective in.
yeah,
What I would say is that, and this is something I've thought about, quite a bit, um, is developing a play style that fits your strength. So there are cerebral players. There are players who are heavy on mechanical, right? And and the reason that these players play their styles is because it fits the talents, skills, and abilities that they have, right? So the example I like to use is I like to use Rafa and DeHang as an example. Rafa and DeHang don't have the best aim in Quake, okay? And I don't think you could probably ask them, and they would tell you, I don't have the best aim.
Yeah, but just
But what
before.
they
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, fair.
but what they do well is they 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 are very good at being consistent in certain in certain ways. Um, for example, they use the right weapon at the right time. They basically, in terms of weapon selection, they're very good at weapon selection. You won't find Dehang or Rafa railing at point blank range or trying to LG a tank from 100% health to 0% health, right? They are very good at using their brain to be in the right position to inflict the right damage at the right time, and select the right weapon.
Yes.
So they're not going to try to out aim you. And I'm not suggesting they don't have very good aim. They do, but there are better aimers that play Quake, and they recognize that and they play accordingly. Um, Arafa's not better aim than Tox. Dehang can't out aim Tox, but Dehang beat Tox. He beat Tox because he had a game plan. He played a champion that not a lot of people were playing in clutch, and he played it very well. And so when I talk about the cerebral part of Quake, what I mean is that playing to your strengths. If you're
That's right.
if you're less a mechanical player, but you have something like photogenic memory, or you're very good at
Photographic memory, not
anticipating.
photogenic
Oh,
memory.
sorry, photographic. But if you've got something insane like photographic memory, where you can store the times of all these items on the map at like this, then most certainly you should use that to your advantage and develop a play style that works around that. And you can do that. So for me, I think I'm less a cerebral player, more a mechanics player, but I also am the type of player that I don't think I have the best aim. And so I play a style that's heavy on aim, but I think I need to be a little more cerebral. And so to your point about how do you practice that? Well, that is something
That's difficult, right?
it's difficult. It's hard.
Because I
I
think
don't.
it's just very time consuming because you have to watch demos, you have to watch demos again, you want to watch your opponent's demos, you don't always have the tools, you just like, and then like practicing to switch off those weapons and those instances, it's very difficult.
It is. It is. And there's different ways to practice it. I mean, I've always been I've always been the type of person that the way I practice is I just play a lot. But at some point you get some diminishing returns. So watching a VOD, and really not just watching a VOD, but analyzing it and determining what you did wrong, I think is helpful. Um, I think if I were to go back into time with a tidbit of information and give it to my younger self, I'd say watch your demos.
Yeah,
And
you
don't
learn a
watch your
lot.
demos because you made a sick air rocket, but watch your demo to see what you did wrong and then change it. And by change it, meaning don't do that again. Because I think too many players get stuck doing the wrong thing multiple times because they just don't stop doing it. And the result is I have a lot of bad habits from my old days that I haven't been able to shake.
Sometimes they
Um,
don't even recognize that it's a bad habit because it's so ingrained into the way they play.
Absolutely.
And
I
that's
mean,
one of the issues with practicing a lot. I was going to say is like you can also reinforce like habits you don't want to, just because you haven't even picked up that you are doing this. Like there's a specific, some players sometimes get stuck going a particular route constantly, and they just don't realize that every time they get to point X in the map, they always go left for some reason.
right, right. That recognition is important.
Yeah.
Um, the interesting thing though is that I think in Quake generally, it's in older versions of Quake, it was easier to identify those mistakes and correct them. Um, Sometimes in Quake Champions, you
We're
make
gonna
a
get to the.
mistake.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and so we can get to that. We can, but comparing Quake, older Quakes to Quake Champions, it is a little bit more difficult to identify what's really a mistake sometimes with some of the weird bugs and stuff that happen. So that is definitely frustration, and I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yeah, well, I want to jump to that, but I want to jump back as well because there's something you said about Rafa and Dehang, which I don't think is complete. I think you're right. I think there are better aimers, but I think people have to at least by this point recognize that they're still exceptional aimers, and they are probably in the top 10 aimers in Quake period. And I don't think I think Quake is still deeply, deeply, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it being a mechanical game. I don't think it makes it any dumber. You look at basketball, it's a fucking, or any professional sports, they're all super mechanical games anyway. The depth of it comes from the mechanics and people playing using the mechanics against the opponent and using it in their favor. And if
Right.
you look, like, there's a demo of Rafa, for example, who I hear this all the time. He's not that, his aim is okay for the elite players. Like, can you show me another demo of somebody hitting 90 railgun on Strengths? Like, Strengths is an elite aimer himself,
Hmm.
and Rafa. I think that this was a game on what Quick Live players call Evolution. No, they call it Toxicity, I think.
Hmm.
In CPM, it's called Pucker 322 or
Hmm.
Evolution. And even against Toxic, you watch that game against between Toxic and Dahang. Like, Dahang's aim is probably top 5 in the world. Like, that's like, it's not a surprise that to me. It's always a surprise to me that players always say this, especially about Rafa, that his aim isn't particularly strong. And I've never seen him have like a game where he aims poorly. And I think people are gonna say, like, it's because he positions himself well, so he can hit a lot of easy shots. I think a lot of the other pros do that as well. Like, I don't think you find too many pros and I'm thinking mainly of Quake Live and I guess Quake Champions. More Quake Live because, like, it's, what you hit and stuff. With Quake Champions, especially the early tournaments, it's hard to reliably kind of use them as a measure because there were so many issues we found out later with how hit registration works. But I guess Evil is a guy that seems to he can snap onto the enemy at any given time. Base is a guy that seems to be able to do that, but things are a little bit dodgy with Base. There's a couple of other Eastern European players, but Rafa and Dahang's aim is exceptional. Do you, I don't know.
So
Do
here's what I'll say. Here's
yeah,
what I'll say. Right. In regard to aim, there's so many different ways to aim,
yeah,
and
that's fair.
one of the ways you aim is when you know where the opponent is.
Yeah,
So it's much easier to rail an opponent if you know where he's coming from. It's much easier to rail an opponent when you know where he's going to land or where he's going to move. And in my opinion, guys like Rafa and Dehang, who are very good and they pride themselves on thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead, that helps your aim
that's
because
fair.
you know where to look. So ha- n- if you know where to look, you've already got your crosshair placed where it needs to be placed. It's much easier to hit that shot. So, so I think that's huge. I think that is insanely beneficial. Crosshair placement, having your crosshair placed in the right place is the best thing you can do to pad your stats, so to speak. So,
Yeah,
so that would be my argument to you, is that those players that are able to predict at a high percentage of success where you're going to be are the ones that are at a huge advantage in terms of aim. Um, Now things like flick shotting and snapshotting, and
That's like
extreme
part
tracking.
like genetics and part like
Yeah,
luck,
yeah,
man. Let's be honest. Like
yeah.
everybody hits those, and lots of people, So it's like but I'm just saying in general when you look at it, and I'm thinking like Rafa playing somebody as good as him, like a Dahang or an Evil or a Kula, whoever else it may be. They are also aware of these things as well. They also have the player knowledge of like, okay, all these things are important. I know my enemy's this. I know the items are coming in this order. Like I'm not sure against like if there's the whole like division difference, the other player's going to get annihilated. But
Sure.
against because of these things that you've mentioned, Raf is always going to have his crosshair in the right place. He's always going to be positioned perfectly. He's always going to be on the right item, so on and so forth. But I think once he starts playing players of his skill, like, we see Rafa, competing with the best players constantly, and same with Dahag and a lot of these other guys, and I think they all just have exceptional aim and movement. Like, I think that's a large part
Sure.
of it, and I think that sometimes covers, like, the brain aspect of it, and I think people overthink the analytical aspect of Quake a little bit too much, outside of, like, analyzing your demos and finding a way you do wrong. Once you know how to play a map, like I think in a lot of ways, Quake might be a bit of a solved game. Like everybody understands what the most optimum play style is, um, and like how does the game grow next? I don't know, but so I don't know if you have anything more to add to this in particular. I was going to take a couple of steps back and go to OSP, but
Yeah, so I would say, as far as mechanics go, I think the most important mechanic is movement. The second
yeah,
most important mechanic is aim.
yeah,
Um, and then um, with movement is map knowledge, right? And then
that's right.
the third thing is the cerebral nature of the game, right? And you could argue that maybe the cerebral portion is more important than aim. But movement only gets you so far.
Yeah,
Map knowledge only gets you so far.
yeah,
Timing items only gets you so
that's
far.
right.
So,
It's a
so
combination of these things. You're absolutely
so
right.
but movement is definitely the number one um mechanic that is both most difficult to learn for new players and arguably most important. Because even if you know what time the item's coming up, if you can't get there on time,
That's right. It doesn't
then
doesn't matter. It doesn't
doesn't
mean that.
matter. So movement, aim, cerebral components. I would say that's the list.
I agree
Um,
with that. Yeah, I think that seems reasonable, and I think that's because you could listen. You could be the most cerebral player in the world. If you can't aim for shit, dude, you're never winning. You're never beating anybody. I'm so like ultimately, it's a first-person shooter. The shooting part of it is a big deal. And I think people try to. I think it's because games like CS and Dota that have kind of a deep like knowledge side to the game, they've made Quake players feel a little bit uncomfortable, so they've kind of gone with this narrative that, oh, it's this super deep, cerebral game. And I don't think there's anything embarrassing about being a very mechanical, super mechanical game. Fighting games are super mechanical games, and they seem to embrace that aspect of their video games. They don't kind of shy away from it. They,
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think you're right. It is movement is the biggest barrier for new players, and that's unfortunately meant that Quake's kind of taken a backseat to a lot of other video games as a result of it. Do you think? What do you think? What do you think the future of Quake is looking like right now? I mean, I think we're jumping ahead a little bit, um, but I don't mind getting into it because we're kind of going into it naturally. It seems like.
Um, yeah, it's a pretty good segue. The future of Quake. You know, I've talked about this topic with a lot of people, and both people who are pessimistic and those that are optimistic. Um, and
We're not gonna drop names.
I've talked to players like Dewey. I've talked to players like Rafa. I've talked to
Yeah.
players like Phazon and Pie Hero, who's a newer player from Team Fortress 2, making the transition. Players like Death Row and Venom. Players in the QC Discord, European players, FaZe, Zoot. We've all talked about these types of things, and you know, from my perspective, I think that Quake will always be a niche game,
Yeah.
um, and that's okay, because I think the you know, what's on the table here is a very, very high growth industry in esports. And you don't have to have the majority of the market share. You just have to have a little piece. Um, and I think Quake can have a little piece of that. Um, I think Quake Champions has the potential to grab a little piece of that market share. Um, and it has a lot of the elements that are needed. And I think that, for Quake to survive in 2018, you have to update the formula. Nobody wants to play the VQ3 Duel. 15 minutes of, very, very, kind of, um, in a lot of cases, kind of slow, deliberate,
Boring.
no surprises. You know, a game. Your spectators are not going to want to watch a VQ3 Duel. Um, but these round-based types of mechanics are what these round-based mechanics are what are successful in esports. And I think Quake, the way, the dual mode, for example, it is effective as a spectator friendly mode. There's no doubt about it. People would rather watch Quake Champions Duel than Quake Live Duel. I'd much rather watch. Now, playing it is another question, and we can get into that later. But you know, the bottom line is the Quake formula has to be updated. It has to be tinkered with. It has to be adjusted. There's no grand vision. We're taking an old game, an old we've taken the Quake tradition and we're trying to bring it into 2018. I think that's the perspective you have to have, and so it has to be tweaked. So to your point about, well, can it survive? I think it can. As a spectator sport, I think it can. I think the key is going to be having game modes that people have fun in, having rule sets that pro players can coexist in, having a balance that makes sense, and then fixing all of the ancillary bugs and issues with the game.
Um, I think I agree with you on a couple of things here, and I disagree with some things. And I think I'm going to try to make the strongest arguments without making it sound like I'm complaining or whining. I think Quake will survive because Quake has survived. It's been 20 years, and I don't see the community ever completely disappearing. I think in some format it'll salvage through. A small fan base of hardcore fans will continue to either play the game or develop the game, and I think that's just how it's been and how it'll continue to be until all the players that touched Quake die. I think for whatever reason, the Quake players who once Quake players hit a certain level of skill, it inspires them to stay for a long period of time. And it's just a matter of kind of getting over that initial hurdle. Once players can kind of put all the things together with the movement, the aim, and the cerebral stuff, I think it really, excuse me, I had to sneeze, inspires them to stick around. I don't know why. I mean, you're back. Like, for example, I've kind of gone in and out. Lots of players we see in the community are now coming back or leaving, and that we know inevitably they'll come back. I think you're right in the sense that Quake needs to be, I don't know if updated, but there needs to be an evolution in terms of design of where the game is going and so it can actually develop a healthy competitive community. I think you're absolutely right that there has to be a good public pool in order to be a strong pro scene. Now, and I think you're right. Esports is high growth. The question now becomes: is Quake Champions the right game to move Quake into 2018? I think what excited me initially about Quake Champions was when I heard about it, is that we understand they they had claimed that they understood that in 2018, 1v1 isn't really popular, and that Quake needs a strong competitive 5-on-5 team mode, and that the new Quake is going to be developed with that specifically in mind. And I thought, excellent. Like, this has been a issue with the Quake community for a long time. 1v1 is, it's very, what's the word? Like, it's savage out there, man. You're gonna get bodied and bloodied over and over again. But inside a team, like, players can be insulated, they can be given specific roles, so they know what they have to do. So even if they're dying often, as long as they're accomplishing, their goals within the scope of their class or their character or their hero or their champion, they will feel like they're contributing to the game, so they're actually playing. Like in older Quakes, if you have a beginner in a CTF team and he's just dying over and over again, like, they understand, and they realize quickly they're not really contributing anything. And I think this, especially when they're on voice with people, it discourages them to kind of keep playing. They're just like, I feel completely useless, and I feel like I'm holding other people behind. But that's kind of where I stopped being excited for the game. Since then, I think they have, reverting back to duel, and then going back to the team mode. I think this has been like a major mistake, which really they need to kind of figure out. I think it might be too late to a certain degree to figure this out, because they've kind of it seemed like they were designing the game for 5v5, but they couldn't figure that out. So they just kind of threw in a dual mode, but they still couldn't figure out the team mode, and they still haven't to a certain degree, because it looks like they're going back to CTF, which I don't necessarily think is the answer. So they kind of bobbled along with 1v1, and now 1v1's kind of become the de facto mode in the newest Quake again. And I think, they weren't able to, let's say, even if you take the game as it is, I think another, mistake they made was their competitive them being organized on the online competitive scene wasn't good enough. Going to ESL and saying, host these web pages where people can sign up, that's not enough. Like, they need to have like a grassroots like team constantly, like, either messaging people or groups or organizing groups to have competitive events going. I think even in this state, there is no reason by now there wasn't a large scale like European sacrifice and North American sacrifice leagues. Even if the game mode is what it is, I think they could have easily had 16 to 32 teams in each, and probably more is before QuakeCon especially. But they've just, those are my I guess I've been speaking for a while now, and I'd like to stop, so because I want to hear your input. But these have been my kind of initial impressions. What do you think? Do you think there's any kind of validity in what I'm saying, or do you think no, there's still potential here?
Well, unfortunately, I agree with you on a lot of points. So let's start with the team aspect, right? So, this idea that I'm a new player and I want to be, contribute, right? So
Yeah.
if you take sacrifice as an example, um, sacrifice when played at a high level is not a mode that is friendly to a newer player,
Not at
right?
all.
So, but assuming a good matchmaking system where you have players of of similar skill level, sacrifice is fun to play, right?
Yeah, I've
So,
heard this from a lot of sacrifice players who have played it, quote unquote, at a high skill level, like who have played it with and against good players. They said it's a lot of fun. We have a blast playing.
right. So I think part of the issue that we have right now with Quake Champions is, um because of because of various bugs and performances, because of people just not being able to run the game optimally, because of so many things other than playing the game, preventing people from playing the game, we have a player base that's not ideal. Okay. So some of the issues people have, particularly newer players, about the barrier to entry, they're playing against players that are a lot better than them. They're playing against a lot of veteran players. So it's really hard to get a good gauge as to how, until now, nobody really knew how fun sacrifice was for a new player. Because when a sacrifice player, somebody who wants to play sacrifice queues up, well, there's not a lot of players. They get a veteran and then they get stomped in sacrifice. And they don't even know how to play the game, right? So the it's really hard to gauge. If CTF comes out tomorrow, there's no really good way for us to gauge, okay, how's the new player, right?
Yep.
Because we don't have a real player base that that provide we don't have a real good player base where matchmaking can give people an ideal experience.
Absolutely. And I think
So in my mind, to your point about, okay, well, I would have expected more engagement around leagues and this and that sort of thing. I think that's too early. And I believe that this game, the best scenario for this game is that the game gets released with TDM, CTF, Sacrifice, 2v2, Clan Arena, okay? And Deathmatch. And that when it gets released, or sometime this year, late 2018, it'll be free to play. Hopefully all the performance issues will be ironed out. People will have a smooth gaming experience. And the player base will end up choosing the game mode that'll be what we'll play for esports. Whatever people play, whether it's CTF, TDM, Sacrifice, whatever people gravitate to is what's going to be the esports. And that, I think, is the best thing.
let the community decide.
Community is going to decide. The numbers are going to decide. The analytics, they will find out from analytics. 50% of the player base gravitates to CTF. That's what people want to play. Okay, we're going to do tournaments around that.
What if it's Clan Arena?
You know what? If it's Clan Arena, then it's Clan Arena. It might, I have some ideas as to how Clan Arena with objectives could work. Something like Capture Strike.
Then it's not Clan Arena.
It's not pure Clan Arena, but it's Clan Arena with objectives. And it's round-based. And it's fun.
Do you think it has to be round-based? Listen, man, like, if you look at...
I think so. From an esports perspective, I think it has to be round-based.
You look at Overwatch, they seem to kind of employ, like, a hybrid, like... Control pace point isn't really round-based. I guess it kind of is round-based, because I think you have to win a couple of...
It is. It's round-based, but it's not, like, heavily round-based like Duel is, right? You know?
Yeah, I think it's too... I think the fun part of Quake is its dynamism, like how dynamic the game is. And I think round limits kind of can impede that to a certain degree. Listen, I applaud them for experimenting here, okay? I think they've shown that at least a couple of things work. That, or at least skills work and champions can work in Quake. Not necessarily in Duel. I think this has been really what a lot of the issues have been. It's like, man, if you can imagine if they could have delayed making this game public knowledge until this QuakeCon, and it was at this stage, just how much more I think excited a lot more members of the community would be, because you could imagine, between now and QuakeCon, hopefully a lot of the other issues are ironed out, but do you think them releasing it in the state it was the right decision? Do you think they made the right... If you listen, I understand as well, like... It's easy. If there's questions you don't want to answer, please feel free to say, listen, I don't feel comfortable answering these. And I know it's easy to say in retrospect, but I think even, like, as soon as I got the closed beta test, I said, no way they should be released. Like, I didn't think it was that... Like, I didn't think I was making a particularly large leap there in terms of, like, man, at the time I thought it was amazing, and now I look back at it and it was so obvious it was amazing. I think it was from the jump, like, you could tell, like, this is not ready to be shown to anybody. Like, why are they doing this?
Well, I think there are things that we don't know
For sure.
that influence that decision. And so from that perspective, not knowing the context, I think it's easy for us to say they shouldn't have released it. EA, they should have kept it closed beta.
I think from the
Um,
perspective of any semi-veteran Quake player, if you give them like, okay, here is the latest version of Quake World, here's the latest version of competitive Quake 2, here's the latest version of competitive Quake 3, and here's Quake Live, and here's Quake Champions, and say which one is not like the others in terms of feature sets, in terms of performance, in terms of just basic ability to play. I think everybody's gonna look at Quake Champions and be like, listen man, this is not ready to be played competitively, especially for $1 million. Like
right,
I think the $1 million though I think is different because that's AMD money, so forget that. The $1 million, like people always go on about like, oh I wish that was spread over time. It's like, no, you don't get that choice. That's sponsor money. If they wanted to blow 10 million at that tournament, it's not, you can't really say, what are you gonna say? No thank you? Of course you're gonna
right,
say yes.
right, right.
But
Yeah, I mean,
I think, you know, somebody at id Software could have said, listen man, like if we release this, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Like it's not so much that, oh, we're gonna lose out our money. We put this out, this game just simply is not ready. Like that's just all that there is to it, I think.
yeah, I mean,
Is
I
that
think
disagreeable? Like I find like a lot of people give me, you know, will give you flack for something. I don't think that's disagreeable. I think that's pretty much dead on.
no, I mean, I think like you said, like you mentioned, it's easy to say, they should have released it. They should have, they should have waited. They should have waited for ID Tech 6, or they should have done this, or they should have done that. And whether you're right or wrong, it doesn't really matter because we're here today, right?
Right, but
So
well, yeah,
I
I
don't
agree.
really like too much. I don't really think it's of any benefit to us as players or the development team or the community to say to talk about those things because it doesn't help, right?
You're
So
right.
there's a lot of things that went into those decisions. What does help is for us to understand the context. There's a lot of things that we don't know that went into those decisions, right? For all we know, if they hadn't gone EA, we wouldn't have Quake Champions at all. So I think understanding understanding you don't know everything, knowing that there's external forces that drive things, um, and understanding that we have Quake in 2018. What is better for us is to support the game as much as we can if we want it to succeed.
I think you're
Um,
right.
and and again, we can, it's fun having the conversation. Well, if they had waited, or if they had if they'd use ID Tech 6 and all this stuff, it's great to have those
Listen,
sort of
we're
agreements.
ultimately you're
Yeah,
also on a podcast, so we're gonna have these, these
yeah,
sorts of
yeah.
conversations. Yeah, um, I think you're right. I think there's nothing that can be done with respect to these conversations. There's no way these conversations will have any effect on these decisions that I've made because they've already been made. However, I think they do teach us something important. They teach us what kind of motivations are happening in the background that we can't see. They teach us the decision, kind of what kind of decision making process they're going through, and they teach us with respect to the competency of their abilities, I think, as well. And I'll be honest with you, there's some things I like about Quake Champions, like the maps I think look very pretty. I don't like, I mean, that's not fun stuff to focus on, but I think from my general point here is that from the trends that we see, we also have to be honest with ourselves with Quake fans because I don't want Quake Champions the same way we got a Quake 4 where it lasted for like a couple of years then it completely died. I'd like to see something more like Quake 3, not the video game, but like the community of how on, and not necessarily the size, but its ability to kind of create for itself and kind of support itself and continue to support itself as it has done to this day. And I think from what I've seen up to this date, we're not going to get the appropriate kind of tools that is going to allow us to support this game in a meaningful way moving forward. Because the truth of it is, they have a legion of people that right now in the Quake community, if they had given us the appropriate kind of tools and game, that would have created way more content than any marketing dollars that they can use, because we're the people that are actually excited about the game. So for us, this isn't work to make like a Quake movie or to discuss Quake, or this is something we do for our fun. This is something we do as our hobby, and we've been dedicated to it. Some of us for 1 year, some of us for 5 years, some for 10, some for 20. So there's been people here that have been playing since 1996 and have been creating and contributing since then, because id Software has always kind of given them the tools at least until Quake 3. With Quake 4 was like where things kind of went south. And Quake Champions, to be honest with you, like, I'm writing, it's obviously you can't write it off because it still is in early access, but I think, the decision for a lot of consumers have been made, unfortunately. And it's disappointing for me. I think it's important to keep these things, be aware of these things, because if in 2 years Quake Champions is not here, a lot of the people that are saying that we should only focus on supporting it are going to say, shit, we never really had a chance to begin with, and we should have been more vocal about the issues. So at least at the time when there was development, there's something could have been done about it. I think there is a culture of yes men that's kind of grown around id Software, and I don't know why that is, because the VQ, the old Quake communities, they were very vocal about their issues. They were very clear about their criticisms, and they made sure that the community was aware of them. And I think in Quake Champions, you have a lot of, prominent people who, for better or worse, constantly kind of try to downplay meaningful criticism and conversation about the game, because they just kind of, they throw it up as whining and complaining. And I don't think that's fair to the Quake players that have been here for a long time, who would like to see a new iteration of their game, who would like to have no issues with the skills, who have no issues with the heroes, who have no issues with the focus on the team mode, to be given the appropriate, like, listen, this game, the Quake 3 community gave them all the competitive features they could ever dream of for Quake Live. That's how it became a competitive game to begin with. You would imagine that at least when Quake Champions come out, they have $1 million, they have at least a timeout command for a middle of a game, to avoid an embarrassing situation where somebody lags out on LAN. And we saw that happening on LANs in Quake Champions. For a competitive game, like, it lacking simple competitive features has been disappointing, which is, as a tournament organizer, why I haven't been even considered. And I think a lot of other tournament organizers I've spoken to from the Quake 3 and Quake Live communities have the same considerations. Like, there's no tournament features for us to really work with. Is that
Yeah, and
is that unfair? Like, listen, like, I'm giving a very sober, I think, kind of perspective of what's going on here, and I would love to support it. Like, the truth of it is, once it got announced, like, there was a lot of talks and a lot of private channels about hosting like big tournaments, big leagues and stuff, and when we finally got the software, we realized there's no way that this can happen.
yeah, I think, so you bring up some really good points, and honestly, I agree with you on the vast majority of them. I mean, I think, you know, the lack of competitive features compared to other Quakes, um, being that, if you look back at Quake 3 and Quake 3 CPMA and OSP, MVD in CPMA was something that was revolutionary. No other game had MVD.
Nope.
And to think that, in 2018 a new Quake wouldn't have MVD,
It
it
feels like we're
seems like
moving backwards.
a massive, just an oversight, but at the same time, we're in a different environment where maybe MVD is not something that is useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, we're in the Twitch era now, we're in the
Absolutely, yeah.
stream era now. So yes, there are some functionalities and features that you think, well, shit, why wouldn't we have MVD? But then you have to look at the context as well. Now, your point about timeout commands and some advanced matchmaking or match like refereeing and that sort of thing, you're right. Like, that stuff should be there. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't have a timeout. There's no reason why you shouldn't have a referee that can spectate a game and manage the game from a league perspective or competition perspective. So I agree with you there. But I think the one thing we have to keep in mind is we have to, so we can sit here and complain about features and functionality that aren't being implemented in Quake, because no matter who you talk to, those that are supportive of Quake Champions or those that are critical, there's one thing that is a complaint that is valid between everybody, and that's development has been slow in this.
I'm okay with
Point
that,
blank.
but believe it or not.
But
But as long as they'd kept it in the shadows,
sure,
you know?
which is fine. But the reality is the development is slow in this game, and so
Yeah.
when you accept that fact, then you have to understand. Okay, what are the priorities, right? And you have to work off of a priority list.
Yep.
And unfortunately, referee functions, although they are important and they should be there, they're not, and they're not a priority
Well, here's the
because
thing, dude. If you look at how many tournaments have been announced for 2018 in terms of LAN, maybe some of these big
listen,
LANs are
bro.
looking at look at this and saying, "Listen, we don't have simple administration options. If something happens in the middle of our LAN, what are we supposed to do? We're not like time is limited. We only have 3 days, 4 days at this massive convention center. We can't be constantly replaying matches because you don't have a timeout ability in this game. Like, these things, they may be low on the priority list, but they may be affecting the game in a lot of ways outside the game. If I'm a tournament organizer and I don't have simple things like this, there's no way I can, in good consciousness, hold a tournament, because if something goes wrong, what am I supposed to do?
No, it's a very good concern. I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you. But the other thing that you mentioned was, well, we've been ignored. A lot of us have been ignored, and
I never said
um,
no. I didn't say ignored. Listen. I'm sure they're aware of a lot of these things. I'm not suggesting like they're ignoring that. It can be like it just seems like once you go public, you have to move things on issues fast because consumers
right,
have way too much choice. You don't have the same kind of luxury of kind of doing things if the project's private at your own time figuring things out. I think this
right,
was like even if they had released the game on EA around the same period of time, honestly, when I was in the public closed test, it didn't feel like they had a really meaningful system of collecting the information. It seems like people were just spamming the forums, and that was really it. Like it didn't seem
right,
like that was the impression that I had.
right.
I don't. Anyway, I hope this is the truth. There's some things in Quake Champions I like a lot. I think the experiment with the multiple movements has been generally a success. I think they've shown that you can have a VQ3, a Quake 2, a Quake World, the CPM guy with different movements in the same arena, and you can generally figure it out and have a good, fun way to play with it. I think they've done a lot of good things. I think they've added some decent new maps that will probably become staples in other Quakes as well. To be frank, but we'll see what happens, man. Like a lot of the criticisms I've had have generally been public. Like I haven't really voiced them anywhere. But and I think what I'm saying, I don't think I'm stretching or like I don't think I'm particularly negative. I just from what I've seen for the past year and a half in the product we have today, they have a difficult fight. That's for sure. It's not going to be simple. They have a lot of complicated tasks they need to figure out. Um, and at some point, we've seen like we don't like you said we don't know what's going on in the background as well. We don't know what kind of pressure they're under, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely some positive progress being made. We have a
For sure,
public test server.
for sure.
There, we're putting feedback on the public test server forums. There seems to be a a more conscious effort on the developers end to get feedback from the community.
Yep.
So I am very optimistic that we can see some real good balance changes and improvements to the core gameplay over the next several months. My concern is time. Is
Yeah.
the game is going to be released sometime this year, most likely quarter three or quarter Q4. So either right before QuakeCon or right after. And there's so much that still needs to be done, just from team game modes, balance, maps, content, let alone spectator tools, proper match
Well, we
tools.
talked about this
Um,
earlier. You said, it's a lot harder in Quake Champions to improve, and that's because you don't have even demo tools, which I understand. Demos might be a lot more sophisticated, especially because modern games just push so much more data and information to actually capture. So, demos I can understand, but that's just another thing that's you look back at it and you think, well, we have fucking 7 Quakes with demo features. Let's use an engine that's going to be really difficult to have demo features. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. No, that sounds like an awful idea. Like you look at all competitive. Anyway, sorry, but look at Dota and CS:GO. They have demo. I guess Overwatch is the exception, but they're working on it at least.
Right. And there is some work being done on Quake Champions for demos.
Demos I
So
understand because I just think it's more sophisticated.
right. But there's a lot of action in the chat right now about the minorities in Quake item we didn't talk about.
Oh, we're going to get to it. Like I didn't say this earlier, but the whole point of this kind of podcast is like we have some general ideas that I kind of post up, and if we can touch them, great. If not, it is what it is. But it's supposed to kind of give you an idea of what sort of stuff to kind of we'll discuss. And I was thinking about this. I'm pretty much done with Great Champions. I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add. Listen, I wish them the
No, I think
best
we've
of
talked
luck.
it to death.
Yeah,
I think we've talked
I wish them the best of luck. I'm a Quake player. I've been a Quake player for 20 years. I'd love to see Quake doing well again. Like, people are always just like, oh, why are you so negative? Mind you, anyway, it doesn't matter.
You're critical because you love Quake.
Yeah, I'd
And
love to see
that's
another
what we
Quake
got.
that lasts another 20 years. Who wouldn't? Let's be frank. Um, but let's get on this topic of minorities in Quake. I was thinking about this even before I showed you this slide. I was thinking about it. I was just like, is this something I want to bring up? Because just so you know, I'm not white as well. So I'm a minority.
Yeah, I know.
I'm Middle Eastern. So this is an interesting topic for me. Because from my perspective, I guess let's start with you because this is about you, not about me. Um, what has your experience been as a black man playing Quake? Um, was it like even when I don't know if I knew you were black, to be honest, before I started seeing you stream. I think I did, and I don't know how, but I think I well anyway. Um, even as something as simple as having a face cam, was there a kind of a moment you had to think about it, like shit, like I'm not like a white guy, like this might be, I might get some kind of attention I really am not looking for.
Well, it's
What's your
interesting
experience been
because
like? Let's
yeah,
start with that.
even since the day that I started Quake, it's always been interesting when people find out that you're black because back when I was playing when I was younger in the 90s, I'd play and I'd mention, yeah, you talk with people and they ask your background. Yeah, I'm Haitian from Haiti, I'm black. And back in the day, it was always a surprise. Like people were generally surprised that a black person was playing Quake because you have to understand in the US, it just wasn't a thing. It wasn't a very common thing for or people had this idea that I guess a black person didn't have the money or couldn't afford to have a computer and get on the internet. So I'd always get these interesting reactions from people when they found out I was black playing Quake.
Like,
But then it was always like a curiosity, like, oh, that's cool, and then it was never an issue after. So as far as like racism in Quake, never really experienced it. Maybe just surprise. People always it was always kind of a curiosity. Oh, Death's black. But that's where it ended. Quake is one of those games where you're playing, you know, you're playing FPS, a first person shooter, and you're fragging somebody, and it doesn't really matter what color you are, who you are, your sexual orientation, your sex, like you're just fragging people. Um, so so that was always interesting. Is when people found out, they'd always be kind of surprised. As far as streaming goes, I had no hesitation to webcam. In fact, I was excited to get a webcam. Um, there's never, I was never. Yes, there's some people out there will, if they want to be toxic, then they'll go, they'll say some things,
he'll
but
be internet tough.
it just rolls off your back. I mean, it's not. I've had that type of stuff in my life playing soccer and sports. I've had people call me, you know,
The N word.
the N word because I was playing soccer and I mean, quick story: I was playing soccer. I shut this guy down, and he was so frustrated. He just he called me the N word. I
What'd
guess
you
he was
do?
trying to get a rile out of me, and I was 13.
Wow.
I was
How old
13,
was the
and
other kid? 13 as well? Don't tell me he was a
I was
grown ass man.
yeah, it was 13, yeah, 13, 12. No, we were playing a competitive game. It was a select a it was a travel league club team, and my coach told me, hey, that's their best striker. You're gonna play left back, and if he rotates to the middle, you're playing stopper. And I just followed him all game, and he didn't like it. He didn't score a goal, shut him down, and he said he at 5 minutes left in the game, he said it to me. And I it my reaction was okay. I was like, okay, I got him. Like I'm in his skin now. I'm in his head. Like I won. I won this game. I did my job. But part of me was like, why the fuck did he have to say that? And so I actually went to the sideline. I told my coach, I told my dad. My dad, who's a very big pacifist, he said, okay, don't do anything to him. You don't need to fight him. My dad went over to the coach, told the ref. The ref went over, told the kid's dad and the coach, and they took care of him, and that was the end of it.
Understood.
So I've never been the type of person to, uh, you know, to be super aggressive or to try to beat somebody up or teach them a lesson. I was kind of taught by my dad that you only fight when you're defending yourself. You protect yourself, you protect your family. You don't need to be beating people up for stuff like that. And I decided I'll just let the system take care of the person, and hopefully he was reprimanded for it and disciplined. But
Funny that you say that.
but
You're
that's
pretty
happened. That's
aggressive
happened.
player.
Oh yeah,
It's
oh,
really, it's just
really.
like I would never guess you're a fucking pacifist in real life by the way you blast forward with your rockets. To be honest, fuck.
Yeah, right, right.
This guy's
Um,
peak railing constantly. Thought you were a pacifist. What the fuck?
I've had that happen in Quake. I mean, it's the same thing, and you just
Well, I
you understand that people are trying to get to you and they're trying to get under your skin. And what I've learned is whenever someone's trying to get to you, inaction is more frustrating for them than action. Meaning, not doing anything and ignoring them
yeah.
will screw them up more than reacting to it and getting out bent out of shape.
Yeah, once you feed into their energy, they feel like they've won. They feel
Yeah,
vindicated. Their
yeah,
strategy works, so they will use it again until it stops working. I think racism generally in the Quake community, once you kind of have a certain amount of respect from the, in terms of a player, it goes away. But I think if you're a shit player or a medium level player and you're kind of not that good, I think, people are very explicit, especially in the forums and the chat channels, especially in the past, because I think a lot of the admins were also white, and there was like a culture of just like, man, don't be so sensitive or whatever. I don't know. There was like a real like just be a man culture, but like if you said anything about white people, like that's when you would get banned. It's just like, whoa, guys, what happened to not being sensitive. But generally, yeah, it's an interesting poor time in Quake because I guess I guess a couple of questions to ask you about this. When I talk about minorities, I don't mean to just discuss racism, but obviously that's, considering you're American, you're a black male, and you're also a Quake player and a CPM player, I figured it'd be an interesting to bring up if you had any particular experiences. And, it's good to hear that you haven't, because it really sucks to see, and, people get kind of picked on for stupid things like this because the people doing it, they understand there's no consequences generally,
right.
especially like in the big four. Like, yes, realities had also had this culture of just saying anything goes.
Yeah.
So like, I can imagine if if you're a young woman or you're a young black male or like a young person of color, and you like get into Quake and you go to ES Reality, like you're probably going to think this is a hyper toxic community,
Right.
and I really don't want anything to do with it. But that just seems to be video game culture as it is, right? And a part of internet culture, unfortunately. But I didn't want to just discuss the racism aspect of it. I guess the next question of it is just like, who do you think is the best black player to have played Quake?
Oof. That's good. I don't know,
Because
honestly.
there's his keep in mind, Gunmetal was black. Or if you remember,
Gunmetal was black.
yeah,
Yep.
KFC Gunmetal was black.
I met
Devious was
Gunmetal. I
black.
met him in a LAN.
Okay, dope.
I met Gunmetal in a LAN. And you know what's actually funny? Gunmetal's Haitian too.
Oh no way, that's dope.
Oh. So we're connected. We're connected not only by skin color, but we're connected by nationality. Where our
Yeah,
parents came from.
yeah. You guys ain't that close though. Don't pretend like you're boys. It's like that's my boy. She's like, God, Oscar Metal is like, I have no idea who this guy is.
CK Spook Corey. He's black.
Okay. There was
Rafiq,
Lost
Lost
Cause.
Cause.
Yeah.
He's black.
There's Devious.
Devious is black.
Do Latinos count as black? Because I know some Latinos count themselves as black.
No, Latinos are just Latinos.
Because I know some Latinos are just like, I'm not Latino, I'm black. They're just like, okay,
well,
fine.
There are Central American countries and South American countries where they have a very dark skin tone.
No, this is like light skinned, it's funny. Even like I was watching a podcast yesterday. I think it was Drink Champs with Nori and Fat Joe was on it. Fat Joe's just like, nah, man, I'm black. Like, stop calling me Latino. It's just like, what the fuck, man? You're definitely Latino. So I was just wondering, like, if you would, because I was gonna throw in El Pajo in there as well.
Well, but
I guess he doesn't count.
Well, I think some people. So I think in America, because of some of the history, I think some minority groups kind of stick together, and so
Yeah,
there are groups of people where you have blacks and Latinos together, and they can relate on some level in certain ways. So I can see where you might see where somebody feels like, well, I'm part of the black community because I have black friends in my crew. My crew's black and we're all cool.
yeah, except for
So
white people, by the way, guys.
I can see that dynamic. No, and white people.
Nah, they don't get that pass, dog.
No, they do, and here's why. Because at the end of the day, it's the stratification in the United States. At the end of the day, for those that really understand it, it has nothing to do with skin color. It has everything to do with economics.
No, man, I'll say this much. I've had this argument a lot of times. It's still worse to be poor and black than it is to be poor and white in America and in Canada, to be honest with you.
It from the optics, maybe, but at the end of the day, being poor is what sucks.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and when you get past the, the all of the, when you get past some of the bullshit and you understand, and this is getting into politics here, but at the end of the day, really what's going on is you have people that are poor and they don't have opportunity.
That's right.
And race gets used as another way to divide us.
Absolutely.
And that's really all it is.
I agree.
And some of us are able to see it. I think most of us are able to see it, but a lot of us are not. And we get into these identity politics and race politics.
No, that's not fair, man. Like, it's because studies
and
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because studies continuously show that when you're poor and you're black, or you're poor and you're Latino, you have access to less social services. Your ability to get a job is worse. Your ability to get credit is worse. Everything costs more for you. Like, everything is considerably worse for poor black people than it is. No offense. Like, listen, that's not to say all poor white people are better off than all poor black.
But you bring up some points here, and I want to talk about them real quick because yes. If you look at the statistics,
statistics is a big deal, man.
Than being poor white. Sure, absolutely, but they only tell you part of the story. They don't tell you why. They don't tell you that there's a lot more black people living in poor neighborhoods than there are white people living in poor.
Yeah.
Right. The percentage-wise, right.
Yep.
So the issue here is that you're poor and black because there's a lot of poor and black people, and those poor neighborhoods are worse off. And the reason they're worse off are for a multitude of reasons.
Well, how about 500 years of institutionalized slavery or system?
Well,
like, not to get into this.
Like I said, I don't disagree with you, but if so what I would say to you is the failure here is not so much a failure of being less racist, but the failure is that we have a system that is not very good at lifting people out of poverty. And
unfortunately, that's true. That's very much true. I agree.
There's groups of people, and when I say lift, I don't mean that the government should go out and do things for people. That's not what I agree with, because there's a certain level of personal responsibility that people need to have that they don't have.
That's right.
So I'm a personal responsibility guy first, and then second, I'm about equal opportunity, right? And so if you're given the opportunity, it's up to you to go to get it. And the opportunity may not be obvious, but there's certain things you have to do, certain things you're responsible for to lift yourself out of your hole. But
Absolutely.
our system, economic system, our social system, our government, all of these things are not very good at giving people opportunities to lift themselves out of poverty. And it happens that minorities in a lot of cases are poor and poorer than their white counterparts, but that is a different subject, and the fix for it is a fix that everyone can benefit.
Uh, Listen,
Benefit
I support BLM. What's your perspective on it? I swear to God, I do. Like I'm not like when it comes to minority movements and them being able to secure equal rights for themselves and be kind of brought on par with their counterparts. I always support it. I don't give a shit if they're black, women, gay, whatever, because at the end of the day, that could be anybody, and you want to make sure that if there's a movement for everyone else living better, that you're supporting it. It's just simple. I think the logic behind it is pretty simple. But what's your perspective on it? Just briefly.
I support any movement that is trying to create equality between any group of people that are actually having their rights or that are being oppressed. So I support Black Lives Matter, sure.
Yeah,
Because
this
I think that
all lives matter nonsense is some bullshit.
I don't
Because
like,
black.
I don't have any qualms either way, but the I think the point of Black Lives Matter is to raise an issue,
I agree.
and I think there's a lot of people. So here's what I would say. Um, I think there are people who are threatened by the fact that some of their pie that they had is being taken from them, right? So I'll give you an example, right? So um, in this country, um, it if you compare today to like the 50s or 60s, right? Me as a minority, I'm able to compete with a white guy, Asian guy, anybody, right? Like when we go for a job, I can compete because I have the knowledge, skills, and ability. I'm educated. I can compete with them, right? So this increasing competition from minority groups is taking a little bit of the pie away from people that normally had most of the pie. And so their perception is that, well, I have less now, right? And I think there is a fear from some groups of people that they're being treated on they're being they're seeing less of the pie than they used to,
Yeah.
because there's people being lifted out of poverty, these people being having more opportunity. There are some things like affirmative action, which in my opinion, I think affirmative action is out of date and probably needs to be adjusted. But
I think the policies.
there's
Sorry, go
but
ahead.
these there but there are some things that I think are unfair, but there are some things that are just the way they are, and there are some people, the majority, that feel they're threatened because they're having to compete with people that they didn't have to compete with. And
Yeah,
so I think that's what's happening right now.
yeah. I
Um
saw some. I hate doing this, by the way, but I saw like a great like little one-liner on Instagram or Reddit or something talking about this, and somebody said something to the effect of like, when you are used to privilege, equality starts to feel like oppression. And I think this is what you're pointing out to, that these people have been so used to living a privileged lifestyle. Now that they're having to compete with everybody else on a fair basis, to them it feels unfair because they've lost that advantage they had and their parents had and their grandparents had. It's like, so for them, you're right. They're being defensive, but they're not being defensive because any rights are being taken away from them. They're being defensive because other people are starting to gain rights, and I
yeah.
think that's why
Well,
I
not only gain rights, but gain economic power,
yeah.
gain wealth, I mean, there's a lot going on, and so it's a perceived oppression. Just like you said, it's a perceived oppression from having some of that privilege being taken away, and that's just the rising tide lifting all boats, right? That's what it's supposed to
Yeah,
do,
that's right.
right? If the country's doing well, everyone's supposed to go, be lifted with it. But you have a climate in this country where we've taken a step back, and wages are flat, and all that stuff's going on, and the rich are getting richer, and the we're not doing well, um, for most people, um, and that affects everyone. Um, but but yeah, those dynamics happen, and has nothing to do with Quake, but fun to
Yeah,
talk
it was
about.
it was a
Fun to
good
talk
thing to
about.
talk. Yeah, absolutely fun to talk about because I think this is an important conversation for people of color to have with one another and with their kind of white counterparts in a respectful way. And what I dislike, especially you see this in the Quake community, is the response to Black Lives Matter is hashtag All Lives Matter, and this is a deep-seated aspect of the Quake community that goes all the way up to people like Thorin and stuff, who now have obviously transcended Quake and kind of esports as a whole. Like he's on a whole new level, but like these kind of thoughts aren't, they're not, hashtag All Lives Matter. I think there's a surprising amount of Quake players that support it, and I think that's just fucking retarded in my, with respect, because Black Lives Matter is a movement for equality, whereas All Lives Matter is in a movement to maintain the status quo, which is really, if not oppression, at least complete, like, there's privilege that some people shouldn't have, and they don't want to lose it. And I'm
Well,
sorry,
I
they
think
are going to lose it. It's inevitable.
I
Hopefully.
take anything anybody says online, whether it's Quake or anything like that, with a grain of salt. And if somebody's saying something that I don't agree with, what I like to do is, if I really want to have a discussion with them, I'll have a discussion with them, and we'll talk about it. And I would say that a lot of times people say things online just to get a reaction.
Yeah, that's
I think
fair.
it's no different in Quake. And so, when somebody says something like "All Lives Matter," I just like, okay, whatever. Like it
You're dumb.
if you if you if you if you're if you're gonna just type a one liner, that's
Yeah,
fine. But if you're gonna give me some constructive reasoning as to why you think something is not right and something is, I'm down to listen to it and let's talk about it. And you might have a good point and you might convince me. I'm down to be convinced. I'm not interested in being right. I'm just interested in understanding the truth. And I've
yeah, that's
always
fair.
been that way. And so, you know, all lives matter could be right. Black lives matter could be right. I mean, based on my life experiences, I think the BLM movement is has an absolute right to exist.
I agree.
So, but do I agree with killing cops? No, right?
No.
Do I agree with the extreme people that are either for or against whatever said movement? I don't agree with the extremes. I agree with the truth, whatever the truth, right?
Yeah, but you
Um
know what? With sometimes you got to go a little bit Malcolm X on people as well for them to understand that you're serious. Sometimes it can't be the case. It's difficult to always done. But anyway. Let's go back to Quake. Who's the best Black Quake
yeah,
player?
let's go back to quick. Let's go.
If you want to, no, we
Uh
can continue talking about this. By the way, I'm happy to talk about.
Honestly, from my memory, Gunmetal was always a really good player. Um I mean, he's probably one of the best, if not the best, OSP TDM player that I ever played against.
Yeah,
I mean, Spook was pretty good too. Corey was a very good Quake 3 player.
TK Spook.
So
Did he play with Fatality and CZM in the original CK lineup or no?
I'm not sure if he was in the original
Because
lineup.
I imagine Bloodshot was in the original lineup, CZM was in the original lineup, Fatality was in the original lineup. Who's the other one? I don't
Maybe
remember.
did you say Bloodshot already?
I said Bloodshot already, yeah. Because Bloodshot was definitely in all those teams.
Yeah, Bloodshot was there. I'm not sure. I mean, um, Lost Cause was pretty good.
Yeah, he hit a pretty high level.
Yeah,
Uh,
he played at a high level. Quake 3 and Quake 4.
yeah, that's right.
So I mean,
Lost Cause had
you
some
might
sort of
have to give Lost
documentary
Cause.
done on him, right?
I think he was in the Frag Doc.
Okay, I have never seen it. I remember he was in some sort of video, but hopefully he's doing. Is he playing Quake Champions now?
Yeah, actually, 2v2 with him.
Ah,
We're gonna
nice.
2v2 together.
How are the results?
We're getting better. We're improving. Um, but we still got a little work to do. We're gonna be doing some VOD reviews, and we've got to make some adjustments. We're the problem we have is we are aggressive players.
Both of you?
We're both aggressive players, and we really like to push the issue.
Are you guys
Um,
both greedy players? Because if you can
I,
both be aggressive,
a
it's
little bit.
fine. But
Yeah,
if you're
we're
both
greedy.
greedy, then
I'm greedy. I know I'm greedy. I know
yeah,
I'm
I'm
greedy.
greedy as hell, man. Like I
So
like
that's
getting
something.
frags. Sorry.
Yeah, that's something we need to work on. Just basically, I need to work on specifically is being more patient. Not in 2v2, it's actually better in some cases to just get them low and leave them, than to chase.
Absolutely.
And so that's something I need to work on, and something I'm getting. That's something I need to improve on, and I think he might suffer from that as well. And then just map control, item timing, and that sort of thing. So we're working on it, and we're getting there. We're definitely more competitive than we were when we started, um, but we're doing good. I think we're doing good.
What's the best combo you guys have beaten so far? What's the best two players you've beaten? What's the best team you've beaten? Have you take? I think I've seen you
We've
guys.
taken a map. We took a map from Death Row and Pie Hero.
Okay. Have you guys had any close games with Rafa and DeHank? I think I've seen you guys
No,
play
we
them.
haven't screamed them yet.
Okay, good. Just a quick to wrap up the stuff with the minorities, because I guess who do you think is the best minority to have played Quake? The last question I have, because Prozac was Persian. Maybe he's the only one I can think of too, and Alpahuo was South American.
I mean,
I guess it has to. Yeah, I guess you have to go with Prozac, right? Do you really have a choice here? YOLO?
Sorry, I muted my mic.
Oh, never.
Um, I think honestly, one of my favorite players to watch was El Pajo.
Played super aggressive.
He was insane, super aggressive.
He's dead, by the way. R.I.P.
I know he died. I know. But he was definitely probably my favorite player. He beat some good players.
Dude, he was he's a top 3 Quake 3 VQ3 dueler. Oh, Viju, right. Saigib, I think, is Latino as well, right?
Saigib is, I don't know if he's Latino, but he's definitely something.
Yeah, he's
He's
brown.
definitely a brown guy.
Yeah,
He's
he's definitely a
brown
brown guy. He's not Indian. I thought he was South American. But yeah, Viju.
Viju's probably the
Yeah.
greatest team player in Quake 3 for sure.
Okay, I wouldn't go that far. I would say probably the best flag defender in CTF. Best team player? I don't know, man. I'd probably still give it up to Prozac, dog. Like, Prozac was the best TDM player in the height of European TDM.
I don't really know the Euro guys that much, so I'm gonna have to stick with NA, and I'll probably go.
Dog, Prozac? Are you kidding?
I'll probably go El Pajo. I'll go El Pajo.
Okay, fine. At least you picked a CPM player. I can deal with that.
Yeah.
If you had said VG, I'd be like, fuck out of here, man. There's no way that guy was the best.
Viju was good in CPM, but he wasn't El Pajo.
Viju actually ended up second in the last major CPM TDM tournament, One Sanity, which was fucking 15 years ago now. That's funny. And that was the last major TDM tournament in North America, period. There hasn't been a bigger North American TDM tournament in any Quake since 2003, believe it or not.
I am honored to have played him.
Yeah, tell me, what was your experience in Wansanity like? I wanted to touch on that, and I'd actually read it, but we kind of skipped it for some reason. But anyway, what was that like?
I mean, for me, it was the greatest tournament I've ever played in online, and just based on the way it was run, just the infrastructure behind it, and the competition, it was fantastic. I have so many good memories of playing in it, and Chat Kill, we didn't make it. I can't remember. We might have made it to playoffs and lost in the first round, but I it was great. It was great. It was so much fun. The maps were great. We practiced so much. We were focused. We were motivated. I mean, there's nothing like it.
you could see the vision, right? At that point, you could see like where it could potentially go, and like how people would prepare, and how quickly things are changing in terms of like how people were playing, like the styles that people were using at the beginning of the tournament, the styles people use at the end of the tournament seem to be completely different because people were just constantly improving and progressing and watching and rewatching and analyzing. It was crazy.
Yeah,
Uh,
it brought so many old OSP TDM clans out of death. A lot of former, OSP, former high level TDM clans were playing CPMA, and they were getting better at the movement, and they were, motivated to get better, and it was great. You could get scrims every night. It wasn't a problem. Everybody knew it was going to be Abuse or Alliance of Pain or, Nobles in the
Stickman.
finals, but or Stickmen, but it was still a lot of fun, and there were still a lot of good teams, and there were still some upsets. So it was a great tournament.
That's when you think of things that the community did. Okay, the community organized this and ran this in the early days, and then you look at QuakeCon 2017. You have $1 million fucking. You have a brand new game, and you look at the way that they invested into the online infrastructure and the way they tried to organize teams. That's what's disappointing to me, man. Like that's what really, when you compare like what we've been able to do, and we have way more resources available to us now, but it's done considerably. It's not, you don't have that feeling
Yeah,
of
but it was
pride
it
that
was
like I'm so happy to have been at least a part of it. Forget fuck winning. Like I'm
yeah, but
happy I lost
it's a different
everything, but I
time.
was there.
It's a different time. It's a different
Could
time,
have
man.
done it. I'm telling
It's
you, with Quake
it's a
Champions,
different time.
with $1
It's a
million
different time.
on the line, dude, I guarantee you, if you had just gotten the right people, and I'm not gonna say who, but I can give you a short list immediately, okay, of European and North American admins. You're like, okay, we need you guys to make the run up to QuakeCon fucking super exciting. Guarantee you, they're gonna have 100 fucking teams on each continent, dog.
Yeah, but you're assuming that the game has all of the issues. Like I agree with you, but not Quake. Quake. It the state of Quake champion last year, not gonna happen. You just had too many people who didn't want to play the game, and that's the problem, right? Until we get to a point where people can play the game and not have all these ancillary issues. Yes, I agree with you, but it's not there yet. There's just too many issues that need to be fixed. There's just too much content that's not there. Um, that's the issue. You get those things sorted, then you can make that push. But we've never really been there. Um, so I agree with you, but I disagree with you on the timing.
I guess we're gonna talk about have some more neutral conversations about great champions now, and because I don't want to have this. I don't want you to feel like you're constantly being ambushed with these.
I don't. It's
You know.
all good.
Um,
Bring it on.
what do you like about the new sacrifice, and what do you like about the new Doom? Because there are things to like about them. Let's not, I'm not here to kind of completely sing like a negative song about the game. Tell me what you like about it. Tell me why you like there are things, and I'm not here to criticize. I just want to know your perspective.
I mean, I think I like Sacrifice, the pace. I think it's a very fast paced game. It's a very testing game. It requires a lot of teamwork and communication. And it is it is definitely a game that keeps you engaged, more so than TDM, for example. So it's definitely a fulfilling game when you're able to, when you're able to put together a team that wins. You get that rush with Sacrifice. Duel is kind of in the same way. I think when Duel is done right, when you're playing against somebody, when you're playing and you don't feel that you got cheesed, it feels great. But there are some elements of the game right now in Duel that make it undesirable. And to be fair, I haven't been playing a lot of Duel recently because of some of the issues with Clutch and Galena being very, very strong. And it's gotten to the point where, if you don't want to play Clutch and you don't want to play Galena, you're at a disadvantage. But those are balance changes that are going to happen, that should level the playing field a little bit. The nerf to Anarchy kind of hurt a lot for me as well. So I think the dual mode needs a couple of adjustments. There needs to be some champion balance, and I think it can be very good. Um, but I've generally enjoyed duel and sacrifice more so than not.
I get TDM just because of the 5-second weapon respawn, and the power up drops is not particularly competitive right now. And I imagine you probably, if you're playing that, is just for warm up. Is that right?
Yeah, just warm up and pubbing. TDM right now doesn't have a competitive rule set really.
Could you envision TDM working with the champions and stuff, or do you think sacrifice just seems a lot better suited to that?
I don't think TDM is gonna make a resurgence. I think it would have to be something round based, like we mentioned before. It's got to be something round based. It's gonna be sacrifice. It's gonna be CTF. It's gonna be
Please God, no,
something else.
not round. Here's the one thing I dislike about, or I wish they could figure out how to do better in a sacrifice. The teams go from being effectively neutral at the very beginning. They're both kind of attackers at that point. One person gets the flag and caps their base. And then they're all defenders and the other team are all attackers. I wish there was a bit more stratification in terms of the roles, because it feels like you're either completely all defending, you're all attacking, so that kind of yeah, I guess there's it's also kind of
what we don't know is we don't know what the CTF rule set's gonna be. We don't know if it's gonna be
yeah.
two flag CTF. We don't know if it's
I
gonna be
hope
just
it is.
one flag.
I hope it's very very standard CTF, because
I think what it's gonna be is I think what you said. I think I most likely it's gonna be two flag CTF. If we're gonna use asymmetric maps, it may be one round on one side, round on the other.
or maybe split like 10 minutes on one side,
Yeah,
10
it'll be
minutes
10
on the
minutes on
other.
one
Yeah,
side, 10 minutes on the other, or 7 minutes on one side, or whatever it is.
whatever it is.
But my assumption would be is that we're gonna test those CTF modes in the PTS when it comes to that.
When are you guys testing CTF and PTS?
No idea.
Don't
my
lie to
guess
me,
is
Deth. Come on, dog.
I'm
No one's
just
listening.
I'm just
Come
I
on,
have
Dad.
no idea. I don't know this information, bro. I'm just a player. I think I have some insider information.
Yeah, I think you do have some inside information. That's why I think
God.
Liz. Yeah, I think you're holding on to something right now.
I have I'm dead serious. I don't know anything more than anybody else.
How has the PTS been? You've
There's some
enjoyed it?
movement changes. There's some movement changes on there that need to be adjusted, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Do you think at some point all the hero balance tinkering will stop? But do you think it'll be more MOBA-y in the sense that they'll always have just... Well, not MOBA. I don't mean that in a disparaging by the way. I like MOBA games. In fact, I play Dota 2 more than I play Quake right now. So that's something I enjoy. But do you think they'll always continue to kind of change values with the heroes just to switch things up like they do in the Dota? Or do you think at some point the heroes and their mechanics and stuff will get set in stone?
They'll get set in stone. I think when a new hero gets released, that's when you may see some tweaking. But I think for the most part, I think I think the goal would be my assumption is that the goal would be to have a hero and not have to fuck with it. Because it doesn't seem to me like it's feasible to continue adjusting champions to make things fresh. That doesn't make sense to me. The game's already dynamic with ability. There's no need to do that. So my assumption would be the only time you'd see balance changes is if maybe there's a new hero that adds some element to the game that may need to either increase the effectiveness of another hero or decrease the effectiveness or another, or maybe bring all the heroes up. Maybe there's a champion that gets added that does so much damage that everyone needs more stack. I don't know.
If you were made head designer of Quake Champions tonight, are there any immediate changes you'd implement? Or let me ask you this: do you have any ideas for any heroes? Not necessarily like the lore and stuff, but like in terms of mechanics, how they would work, or any ideas in terms of skills or game modes? I think because what I like about Quake Champions that it's kind of opened up a lot of people in terms of getting past that initial hurdle of saying "fuck." We're not doing things. They've just people have seemed to have accepted at this point that this is not going to be a Quake the same way that Quake Live was an update of Quake 3. It's going to be something completely new, and I think this is at least an opportunity to, if it's not necessarily Quake Champions is the success, at least we can find a game mode that can work that maybe in a future Quake they will be a central part of. Death, you muted again.
No, I'm thinking.
Okay, sorry.
I mean, other than, I guess, I mean, if there's some balance changes that I would make, I would probably change the rule set around to something frag based with rounds. Um, so my idea for duel would be make it 2 or 3 periods where the first champion you select, you lose that champion after that period, but you can change to any other champion in that period. So the idea would be you can still showcase the different champions, but you allow the the winner to win by frags and still have the rounds, right? So if you choose Anarchy, Visor, and Nyx, and you go Anarchy in the first round, which is 5 minutes long, well, you can use Anarchy, Visor, or Nyx in that first round, but after that first round, you no longer have Anarchy. So then your second round, you have 2 champions you can choose from. You choose Visor first, okay. Now you lose Visor in the third round, and then in your last round, the only champion you have is Nyx, right? So that's an idea that I had where you could be able to cycle through your champions, but there's a risk involved with choosing your champion when you choose it, but you win by frags as opposed to
Understood.
winning the round. So,
Like a
um,
middle ground.
so that's an idea I had. As opposed to whether it would work, I don't know if it works.
Listen,
I
dude,
don't
it
know if it
only
would.
take like 5 or 6 duels to figure out if it's better or worse than the current mode. Let's
Yeah,
be honest. You
it
know what I
might.
mean? I think you could figure out really easily if it works or not if you had
Yeah,
the appropriate tools.
but I mean, from my perspective, there's some balance changes that I would make. That to kind of level the playing field. I think in my perspective, there's no point. I think we have to understand what the goals are. From my view, it looks like the developers want every champion to be played in some capacity. They're not interested in seeing champions that are played very little. And so with that, and that explains kind of why Clutch is so strong right now. Instead of keeping Clutch hard to move like he used to be and a high reward, they want him to be played, but then they have to nerf him. So my view is I'd be okay with having champions that are hard to play but very effective when mastered. Um, so for in this example, I would return Clutch to his harder movement,
Mm-hmm.
and keep his uncapped speed.
Okay.
But if you master Clutch, and it takes a lot of time to do so,
You at least deserve.
you should be rewarded for that.
Yeah, I agree.
So that would be a philosophy that I would adopt. But I can understand why they would want to make the barrier of entry for Clutch a little bit lower for people to play him. That being said, then you need to nerf him. You need to make him less effective, because he's so easy to play. So those are some things I would do, just shooting off the hip.
Yeah,
If I was
absolutely. Just
I
to
was
see
doing
what kind of the idea base is, and it seems like, to me at least, like that'd be something interesting at least to test out. I wonder maybe they have already tested out. I don't know. Like, I don't know what internal testing is like because it seems like they're not really utilizing the community that close to the design. It seems like that stuff's sort of insulated, and then the community just gets, it seems like the PTS guys get it first, and then everybody else gets it afterwards. See what I'm just going to take a quick look at my notes about toxicity. What is the Quake Champions community like right now? How strong do you feel it is? Do you think it has the same kind of ability to last as the Quake 3, Quake 1, and Quake 2? I should have just said 1, 2, 3, but you get what I'm saying. Communities did, or do you think it'll be more like Quake 4, unfortunately, where things just didn't really pan out for that Quake community, unfortunately. They
I mean,
actually, surprisingly, the first
right
Quake community
now,
to die.
well, right now it's not looking good. Right now it's not. I think there's a lot of players that are frustrated at a high level, that are not playing. So I don't know. I don't know that I to right now, if you were to rate the robustness of the Quake Champions community compared to something like Quake Live, or CPMA, I would say, um, you know, not really. I
It's a
wouldn't
bit
bet
more brittle.
a bit more brittle. But
Yeah.
I think part of that is just frustration. I don't think it's that people don't want to play. I think people are just they want to see some real progress made. Um, and so, just the frustrations with some of the small things that can be fixed pretty easily would get those people back in.
Who do you think is the best player right now in Quake Champions? We're gonna have some more general conversation. Sorry, we're gonna be talking about Quake Champions still, but just more generally as opposed to more like positives and negatives, but just what's going on with the community.
Best player.
I guess we'll start with this. Best dual player. And I guess if you really want to say it's that hard for you, maybe we can say best dual player NA, best dual player EU, and then best dual player Australia. If you know anybody there.
I mean, if I were just to go by recent results, I'd say Dehang, right?
That's fair.
I mean, I have always thought that Andy would be, one of the best, if not the best, if you put time in.
That guy's so like I just don't understand. He barely plays the game and he somehow got out of groups at QuakeCon and then made it into the next land. What the fuck, man?
Yeah, I think Andy has some raw talent and skill that that you just can't teach from just playing games and playing, you know, at a high level for so long.
Yeah, it's always
So
just been that.
I think Andy is really he could easily be the best, but I think he's also very frustrated with the game, and doesn't see the need to put time into it. But I feel like Andy could definitely be top two, top three if he were to really apply himself to the game. But that being said, out of active players, I mean, on the North American side, between Dehang and Rafa, pretty much.
Is there anyone even challenging them?
There are players.
It's
that
like
challenge.
what's your boy's name that you played with, the UT guy? Lavac or Lava K3?
Yeah.
Like he seemed to be a pretty promising player. Like listen, these UT, I think he's from UT and they just have disgusting hit scan aim, and I think that was starting to shine through. But I haven't seen him really streaming recently. Has he given up on the game?
Yeah, he's pretty much given up on the game
For the time being. Well, I imagine if there's a big tournament.
I hope it's the time being, but
Let's be honest, there's nothing going on in UT for him to be playing that game either.
Well, he's playing Fortnite right now. He's really focused on streaming.
Okay, that's
really
fair.
Focusing on being a streamer. So, as far as competitive Quake goes, I think Lava is definitely up there. But he's frustrated with the game, and has definitely put it on the back burner.
What about Dewey?
If that, I think Dewey, it has a lot of potential to be a top 5 player.
Just not there yet.
I mean, he's there. He's got the aim. He's a much better aimer than a lot of people. Like, he's really good. Dewey's really good. I just think he just needs a little more time. But Dewey's good. Dewey's kind of disgusting, actually.
Do you know who Vidmedic is?
Yeah, I've heard.
Do you know where he's from?
No, I have no idea.
Because he's been playing a lot of CPM for the past couple of months, and he's been taking maps from everybody. Believe it or not. And like, I've never seen somebody like with aim like his. His aim is just, it doesn't really make sense. It's not that it's botty, but like when you play against him, it feels like your stack is just disappearing for some reason, even though you don't see that many rockets coming your way and stuff, but your stack's gone for some reason. Like, I don't have you any chance to play against him?
I've never played against him, but I've heard that he's a dark horse.
Dude, if he took Quake Champions seriously, he'd be at least as good as Rafa and Dahag. Like, his aim is just fucking, I don't even know how to describe it, but it feels like when I play against Galasak in CPM, I always get this weird kind of wobbly mouse sensation where it feels like I never have a very tight grip on my mouse. Like, it feels like I don't have a very precise control on my mouse, especially when we're having an aim duels. Against this guy, I get something like that, but like my stack disappears way quicker. And I think he's already taken a map from Gela in CPM. So it's crazy. I don't know if you knew anything about him, because we don't really know much about him. He seems like he's a cool guy and stuff, but we don't know what game he comes from or anything like that.
I thought he had qualified for QuakeCon.
He did. He beat Dewey at QuakeCon. He took a map from Avic. He almost 2-0'd Avic.
Yeah, but Dewey is much better. Dewey's much better.
This guy took a map from Avic, dude, and almost beat him almost 2-0'd him.
I mean, he's like I said, he's a dark horse. People warned people about him.
Yeah, dude. When he first came in, like I was just like, all right, Kwong, you need to go play this guy because I don't know. We have no idea if anybody else can deal with him. But you know, he seems to be getting along fine in the CPM community right now. Yeah, the guy's aim is nutty. I don't know how to describe it. Sorry, what were we talking? How did we get this conversation? Shit, I don't remember.
We were talking about who do I think is the top player NA.
Ah, right. So Rafa Dang, these are some upcoming players. From the streams I've watched of Rafa and Dahang over the past couple of weeks, it seems like they haven't dropped a map in 2v2. Has anyone been able to beat them?
Yeah, Effortless and Venom.
But not consistently. Like I see them playing those two constantly.
Effortless and Venom, shout out to Effortless. Good job out there, my man.
I mean, it seems like Rafa and Dahang are winning, like, you know, with respect. I don't know who these guys are, but they seem to be winning like 90% of the games against even these guys. So.
They win. They win the majority.
90% isn't the majority, dude. 90% is pretty much every game. Like, it's crazy. Like, what makes them so good?
Their command. So.
Okay, I'll say this much. Sorry to cut you off. Their communication seems exceptional compared to everyone else.
Yes. I mean, the primary reason that they're so effective is they don't miss a major item, and if you're going to get the major, you're going to get punished for it. They know exactly where they're going to spawn. They're very good at 1v1s. So when items are on the same time, they'll split. One will go major, one will go mega, one will go RA. And more often than not, they'll win their 1v1s. And if they don't win the 1v1, they still get the time and they'll be right back. So their item control and power up control is just very good. And that doesn't even bring into consideration their aim. But being on every major item is going to win you 2v2s. That's just the way it is.
It's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
So that and their and just like you said, their communication is amazing. So when you listen to them, when you watch them play, they're very good at communicating where they're going. They're very good at communicating where the enemy is.
Yep.
They're very good at converging on an enemy for 2v1s, and then they're very good at attacking major items.
Now, all that, I agree with everything you said. However, it seems like, this is going to sound strange, from the what games I've watched, they don't even seem like they're in control of the map the most of the time, to be frank with you. It feels like it's the opponent's team, but it feels like, when you're kind of better than somebody to the point where you can let them have the items and you're constantly they pick up the yellow, you're gonna do 150 damage, so it doesn't really matter if they get the yellow. It seems like people get tunnel vision, like their opponents constantly get stuck in this weird tunnel vision of jumping between heavy mega, heavy mega, heavy mega, and between going to the two is where they constantly these guys are just sitting there picking them off one by one. And listen, I imagine when you're playing them, it must feel very oppressive, like it feels like you just can't breathe. But their opponents sometimes kind of play into their own. It feels like their opponents sometimes play against themselves, unfortunately, and I get it might just be the psychological factor of playing against, oh shit, this is Rafa and Dahang. So you always give them a bit more respect than I think than they actually deserve.
Well, do
you think that's fair? Do you think sometimes people give them a bit too much respect?
I don't think so. I think
fair enough.
I think the difficulty playing against them is, to your point, they don't look like they ever have map control. Yes, but they put damage on you.
Yeah.
Right. So they find you in positions where they can put damage on you, and they're very good at communicating who's weak. Once you hear Rafa say Galena's weak, Dehang says I'm on it, right? And before you know it, Dehang gets the kill. So they're just so good at communicating in general, and not only communicating but uh, uh, executing on the communication. That's the key. Is they communicate, but they execute on what's being communicated.
Yeah, they're shockingly both extremely selfless players on the items. They both want to constantly give the items away to to their teammate. They almost want to be there just to do the damage, secure the item, and let the other guy come pick it up. Which I thought that was a bit fascinating to me, because I imagined at least one of them to be the greedier player. I always think in a 2v2 it's good to have this kind of balance between like a player who knows that they want everything because they're going to destroy with it, and a player that understands that they have to work with a lot less but still be quite as effective. With them it's very different, because they both seem to know that, in most one-on-one scenarios they're going to win because they have the better mechanics. So they both kind of really trust each other deeply, because they know if they go up, even a lot of one-on-twos they seem to win. It's crazy. And I don't know how they do it, to be honest, but from what I see, I just think sometimes the opponents give them a bit too much space, a bit too much freedom, and they kind of get away with that. But I don't know. Your experiences are that no, people aren't giving them too much respect.
I don't think people are giving too much. I just think they're very good at communicating, executing on communication, and then being in good positions to punish their opponents. And people, effortless just said it in chat, but one of the things
Sorry, I haven't been
that
looking at
that
chat.
2v2 is very one of the things that's similar between one of the things that they're good at is they're both good duelers, and you can take a lot of elements from duel into 2v2. Um, and um, and that's why they're so effective. So I think it'll take time for people to catch up, and I think people are catching up. Maestro, Brick, and Dewey play them a lot, and they have a lot of close games with them. Um, I think as people continue 2v2ing them and playing them and getting better, then there will be some closer matches. I would say the gap between Liquid and the rest of the teams is definitely a lot less, but their execution is just very good. They have very good execution.
And there's always the European menace. Let's not forget, these fucking Europeans are godlike TDM players for some reason. You can imagine if there's a major 2v2 event announced, what am I saying? Noctix and Toxic will sign up. And what do you, like, what do you think their chances are against some of these European potential, like, super combos, right? Like fucking Noctis and Toxic. By the way, what a difficult combo of names to I'm not gonna say that again. But
Yeah, say it 2 times fast.
no way, man. Fuck
Noctis,
that.
Toxic, Noxic, Toxic, Noxic, Toxic.
Fucking up already.
But I've watched a little bit of Toxin. I think it's Toxin Noctix or Noctis or Toxin.
No, I don't know. I'm just putting together like a super combo, like Noctis and
Yeah,
Toxic,
I
because they
think
played with Too Good and Sturmy, I think, right? But I can't imagine.
Yeah, I think Tox is playing with Zron. I think I might have seen. But
Okay,
in any
Zron and
event,
Toxic.
Tox in 2v2 is kind of ridiculous. I mean, he just frags out. He
Ridiculous.
doesn't miss.
Like, and he never gets angry.
Yeah, I mean, I think Toxin's Ron. So you have Toxin's Ron, who are both heavy aimers.
And have a lot, with respect to Dehang in history, they both have a long list of accomplishments in TDM, in the much more competitive scene, which is the European one.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a strong 2v2 team, and I don't I think that will be a very good game to watch. I'm I am I would I would probably lean towards Toxin and Zron. I mean, I think aim goes a long way, and because they have just as much TDM experience, if not more, than Raf and Dehang, I think they'll be able to challenge them there. So I don't know. I would have to say that the Euros would be stronger, but I still think that the Liquid does such a good job communicating and executing that even if you have freakish aim, you're gonna get caught out. So Liquid's strong. I haven't seen a team as strong.
Remember the last time when it came to TDM, where a North American team that was looking very strong in North America went to Europe to play TDM. I think it was LAN Arena 7. And that was embarrassing, because 519 got their asses whooped. I think they ended up like in 7th.
But we're talking about Quake Champions and Team Liquid, bro.
I know, but you know what? Ultimately, there's something about TDM and Europeans. They love it, man.
But here's something else I would say that gives Liquid the edge. Liquid is playing, and they play every week. They scrim all the time. Tox plays whenever he wants.
Yeah, but that's always been the case, and he's always been one of the top players. You know what I mean?
I see what you're saying, but let's also keep in mind who won the last major tournament. It was Liquid.
Yeah, you know, did I have this discussion? Because the Europeans in Dota. Did we talk about this earlier? If we did, please stop me. But I don't think we did. In Dota, the big tournament is called TI, and in Quake Champions or in Quake it's QuakeCon. So QuakeCon's not really that important, but Dota is, and TI is. And when teams win TI, they have this thing called the TI hangover. Basically means that they lose most of their motivation to really want to play at a very high level, because they've kind of reached the summit of the game. There's no real... The only thing you can do better than winning one TI is 2 TIs, but winning 1 TI is so difficult that, that once you hit it, like, most teams just coast.
I'm going to cut you off. I don't think the Hang and Rafa suffer.
No, I don't think so as well, but I think the Europeans in the follow-up tournament after Quake Champions, after, like, reaching the summit of Quake ever, like, no, we'd never seen that kind of prize pool in Quake. This prize pool in Quake that just happened in the recent QuakeCon is probably more than, all the money in the past 10 years combined. I can see why the Europeans had no motivation to practice for that. I can see why they didn't really care too much.
Well, then if you think they're going to beat Liquid, then if you think they're going to beat Liquid, then you're fooling yourself.
Listen, I never said I think they're going to beat Liquid, but I think there is this legacy of North Americans going into, hostile territory and not do, at least in TDM, not do, and I wonder if, will Rafa and Dehang at all think about this? Yeah, I'm sure, the Europeans, because they're from that era of TDM, they're probably going to say, oh yeah, I remember the last time these North Americans thought they were good at TDM, they came over to Europe and we saw what happened.
I don't think that's going to be a problem.
It's a fun narrative, at least.
Yeah, it's a fun narrative, but I think Liquid, they're firing on all 4 cylinders, and although Tox and Zron are good,
how much time do you think they really need to prepare? Let's say a tournament is announced for 2 months, okay? You think in the next 2 months they can't catch up in terms of being practiced?
But you can't. The Liquid they have such an edge in terms of communication.
They do.
If you're not practicing and getting better at communication,
that's right.
You know what's funny?
I agree.
When you Tox did he talked about sacrifice when they lost at QuakeCon, I believe, and he talked about the team was breaking up, and he was asked would they bring back the team, and one of the things he brought up as one of their deficiencies was communication. So you have to imagine, if somebody acknowledges you have a problem in communication, for example, and then you don't do anything to fix it, you think that
You're right.
They're going to fix it in a month?
You're absolutely right.
So I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. Team Liquid is playing every week. They scrim every night, 3, 4, 5 hours.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, so
because I come home every night from work and it's just like 10 o'clock. They're still streaming. I'm like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Euros are strong in TDM, but this is Quake Champions. It's a different game, and the guys on top are playing every day, almost.
I wonder if I don't think Noctis is going to, unless there's a big enough prize pool. I don't imagine Noctis playing. 'Cause if he did play, he'd probably play with Toxic. But it's funny that Toxic says that about communication, and he didn't find a Swedish teammate. Are there no other good Swedes for him to team up with? I get it. With Ron, he just gets somebody who's almost as good as him in terms of the ability to output damage. But you're right, if communication is this critical and he's already recognized it, the fact that he got somebody whose native language isn't Swedish is a bit surprising. Because like Reptile just tried to play TDM, CPM, TDM a couple of weeks ago in the TDM Draft Cup, and one of the reasons he didn't play was like, we did some scrims and it's just like, unless I'm communicating in Swedish, it's too difficult, like it's not worth it.
Yeah, I didn't even consider the language barrier issue, but that could definitely be something there. I mean, if you're uncomfortable speaking a language that everybody understands, like English, um, or you're playing with players that don't speak English, that could definitely be a problem. And that's just a basic thing. Um, and Liquid, they don't have that problem, right? So, um,
Is
you
this
know,
Kilgore in your chat the same guy from Clan Nightmare? Or was that
I
something
don't know.
else?
Not sure.
Okay, I'm maybe thinking of
You have to
somebody
ask
else.
him.
Whatever, it's not a big deal. Sorry, so we're talking about 2v2s. I don't know. I'm hoping to see. It'll be disappointing if Raf and Dahang just walk over everybody, because it's just, because the whole point of a tournament is that it's competitive. So I'm hoping the Europeans are preparing, but you're right, I don't really see. Maybe it's just because the times I'm home and the times they're streaming don't match up, but I don't see them streaming too much. Whereas Rafa and Dahang seem to be streaming on a regular basis. How has you been? You tried to get into. Are you gonna try to get to Quake Champions again? QuakeCon again this year? You tried last year, and I was rooting
Yeah, I
for
didn't
you,
make it
and
last year.
yeah, sorry.
I lost it to Hang in the fourth round for the second qualifier. That's the farthest I made it, and then I made it to the second. I think the third round after that, and the second round after that. A little disappointing, but I'd like to try to qualify. It really depends on what kind of gameplay balance changes they make. Whether I think if they make Anarchy viable, that'll help me a lot. But I'm working on it. Hopefully, I can qualify. If not for duel, maybe a team mode, but we'll see.
Okay, so we're kind of getting close to the end here. We've been going on for 2.5 hours strong. I have some rapid fire questions I'd like to ask you. But before we get to that, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you thought we would discuss, or that you didn't see that we were going to talk about that you would like to talk about anyway?
Nope, nothing. Been pretty good.
Because I feel like we covered everything. So let me find my rapid questions. Bear with me for a second. Okay, so what's your favorite current game which is not Quake? Not any Quake game.
Overwatch.
Really?
I'm having a lot of fun with it, actually.
Have you ever tried the Mayhem mode in the arcade?
No.
Listen, it's just one massive gong show fight because everybody has plus 100% HP. Cooldowns on all regular skills are minus 75% time, and cooldown and you build meter on ult twice as quickly. It is like ridiculously fun because with Winston, if you start from the highest point of the map and start jumping, you can effectively fly because you can just keep air jumping with your skill because it reloads every 2 seconds. It's a lot of fun.
I'll try it out. Yeah.
Try it
I've
out.
been having fun with Overwatch. Yeah.
Yeah, Overwatch is a fun game. Favorite Quake 3 mod? No, excluding CPM. Favorite mod, period, except for CPM, OSP stuff.
Probably bid for power.
Wow, yeah, another. Are you playing any Dragon Ball FighterZ?
No.
Alright, fair enough. Neither am I, to be honest with you. Favorite opponent to play against?
Gradius.
Gradius, really? Okay, worst opponent to play against?
Devious.
Okay, favorite opponent to play against in Quake Champion?
Lost Cause.
Okay, worst player you hate playing against in Quake Champions.
Anybody who plays clutch.
Most memorable moment in Quake.
Beating Gradius.
Your favorite map in
Or
any
maybe
Quake.
beating Rat. No, beating Rat.
You beat Rat. Don't be fronting for the podcast, fam. Just because he's not around anymore doesn't mean you could be fronting. Yeah, you never beat Rat on nothing, fam. Don't be kidding yourself.
Nope, beat him on CPM 16.
NA server or EU server?
NA.
Your favorite map?
CPM 3A.
Your worst map?
CPM 22.
Your favorite map in Quake Champions right now?
Corrupted Keep.
Your least favorite map in Quake Champions?
Ruins of Sarnath.
Your favorite power-up?
Protection.
Over quad, really? For an aggressive player to pick protection over quad? Interesting.
Can be even more aggressive with protection.
Yeah, I guess you can. But most current album that you bought?
Bought?
Yeah. No, I don't want none of the shit you pirated. Shit you paid for, dog.
Beatport. I bought a Beatport album. Let me see. I bought a Beatport album. It was a Beatport.
What decade was this?
This was last or a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Basically Beatport, it allows you to buy like tracks direct from DJs.
Okay, dope.
And I bought a Beatport album of Beatport like top tracks, I think top drum and bass for 2015 or something like that.
Oh, okay, very nice.
That was pretty good.
Favorite TV show?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Okay, favorite TV show that an adult would watch?
The Office.
Okay, let's see. Damn, I just had a really good rapid fire question and I forgot it. Players who've impressed you the most?
One player or multiple?
Up to you. But you have to tell me what they did to impress you.
Impressed me the most. Dewey.
For his orbs?
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Dehang clutch movement. Pre-current changes. Old clutch movement.
Who is who do you think is the best player that is chronically underrated amongst the community?
Probably Dewey.
You think Dewey's underrated?
Yeah.
What about Quake just in general, not excluding Quake Champions in this scenario?
Underrated?
Yeah.
In general?
Yeah.
Galasak.
Wow, okay. Yeah, you know what? Because I remember Machiavelli, he was playing Carnage. Galasak is just like, oh, I don't know who Galasak is. I was like, you don't know who Galasak is? Maybe you shouldn't be casting, dude. Fuck out of here. I don't have any more rapid fire questions. Okay, give me your 3 favorite teammates.
Three favorite teammates.
Yeah.
Dark Side Sin. CHK Spiff.
Oh man, I'd forgotten about Spiffy.
And probably CHK Dynamite, also known as Atrocity from OSPCTO.
Marry, fuck, kill, Sin, Spiff, Atrocity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Old CHK teammates.
No, you gotta pick.
I gotta pick my favorite?
No, now you gotta pick marry, fuck, kill. You get to marry one of these 3, you get to fuck one of them, you get to kill one of them. Sin, Spiff, and Atrocity.
I probably marry Sin, fuck Atrocity, kill Spiff.
Okay, that's the end of the podcast from my perspective. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to kind of go through this stuff with me. I hope you had fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
The next portion is if there's any community questions, anybody in chat has any questions for Death, I'm happy to pose it to him, although most people are watching it on his stream anyway,
Yeah,
so you can ask him directly if you really want to know. But if anyone has any questions, we'll give you about 10 seconds to post it in here. Otherwise, that's basically the end. So that's the end of the podcast, I think. I don't see any questions coming in. So thank you again, my friend. I really appreciate the time you took to go through this stuff with me. I hope you had some fun. Hope you didn't feel too ambushed. I know I kind of gave you the topics a little bit late, but they generally covered everything, and I think we were pretty fair and honest with everything. So thank you very much. I'm going to be closing down the stream. I don't know if you're going to continue the stream.
There's a question.
Okay, what is the question?
What do you think about friendly fire in 2v2?
Yeah, well, we can get back into this issue. These are design questions now about Great Champions, and these are very intentional design questions. And I think earlier you'd said something to the effect of, like, there's nothing we can do about what's been done, and I think you agree. But when you see them making these sorts of decisions, you have to really question their competency, I think.
I don't.
That's fair.
I don't think it's fair to make I don't think it's fair to make judgments about competency, because it doesn't really get you anywhere, right? So
You're right.
I think we need to look at this. We need to look at Quake Champions as a project that needs our feedback as a community to get better.
Okay, so let's go back to this topic of team damage. Would you reintroduce it?
I think team damage as a barrier of entry for newer players might be too much.
Yeah, you think it's just newer players, just because their aim is going to be bad and their movement's going to be bad, then they're constantly going to be shooting each other in the back by accident.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And before you say, well, you should have it in ranked modes, one of the design considerations that I think SyncError has mentioned is to minimize any sort of differences between modes, right? So
Absolutely.
Abilities behaving differently in ranked or TDM,
I think that's silly.
Dual and that sort of thing. So
yeah, that's silly.
You start to complicate things when you start making rule sets per mode for gameplay. So
I like the idea of, like, 2v2 being a little bit more fun and less competitive, which is why you have, like, the quad drops and the lack of team damage. I think for that reason they should avoid kind of introducing it into the ranked ladder. Let it be a fun place where people can come in and have fun, and don't create an environment for, like, where ladder anxiety is a real issue, because I think I've seen people. It seems like less and less people are dueling in Quake Champions from the streams, and
Right.
I wonder if that's because people are just like, well, I've hit my peak rank. I don't want to lose it today, so I'll just play tomorrow. But then tomorrow comes and they keep going through the same kind of cycle. So maybe the issue here is they introducing it into the competitive ladder. Just leave it be a casual game mode, and I think it could be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think Duel is suffering from just balance issues. And I think Duel is also suffering from ladder anxiety. I think ladder anxiety is an issue for a lot of newer players.
You're more a veteran player. Do you experience it? I ask that honestly. I know I do. Like I'm frank with myself. I know I get ladder anxiety, but do you experience anything
I
like that?
stopped caring about my skill rating many weeks ago.
Okay, so you did for a long time.
No, I didn't.
I mean, many weeks ago wasn't a very long time ago.
Maybe months ago. I mean, I never. When it initially came out, I had a little bit, but I stopped caring about skill rating.
But it sucks when you lose your rating.
It does, but if you don't lose your rating, you don't learn. If you play to keep your rating, you're not going to learn.
That's fair.
I'm more interested in the result and I'm more interested in what I could have done to win that match than losing 10 skill rating.
Yeah, and
Because if you're worried about the skill rating, then you're also worried about your ego and you're worried about other things. And
that's
not
fair. I saw someone here saying duel doesn't really work. I think, if you relegate duel again like you would 2v2 into a more casual mode and say, listen, we have one competitive mode, it's this 4 versus 4 or 5 versus 5 mode. If you want to play competitive Quake Champions, this is the mode. But if you want to come have fun and play some duel, no problems. Play some 2v2, no problems. We've introduced like some fun mechanics, like, droppable quads and stuff like that, so it doesn't feel like it's as harsh and as penalizing. I think duel, like if you look at Overwatch, Overwatch has a duel mode, but they realize that it's not their main competitive mode, so they make it fun. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What do you think, Death?
I think duel in Quake is a little bit unique, and I think I think you could have a pub duel mode, but I think duel needs to be competitive in Quake.
Do you think this is a part of
I think it's important for duel to be competitive in Quake because duel shows you it gives you a window into what is possible. You can see what players are capable of doing in duel more so than any other mode.
See, for me, my concern is that I think duels are relatively, and I say again, I've played a lot of duel, is a bit of an antiquated game mode. I don't see it being as successful anywhere else in esports, to be honest with you. And I think this is a bit of the old man mentality, of saying we need to keep duel and Quake. I think we need to be, I think Syncera and id Software have shown that there are things we can experiment with and they work. And I think maybe kind of letting duel develop completely by itself is the better way to go, while the focus is on the team play aspects.
Well, sure. I mean, I don't.
It can still be in the game, but I don't think it needs to have a competitive ladder and
I
stuff.
I think it does, and I think it can coexist with team modes. Duel is never. I'm not suggesting duel should be. I don't see the reason why duel can't coexist, and I don't agree with not putting a spotlight on duel, because I think duel is a fantastic mode to watch in Quake and always has been, and more so now. So duel is easy to follow. Duel has fantastic frags. The individual brilliance of a player can be shown in duel, and I think that is important for the success of this game as a spectator sport.
See,
Duel and whatever team mode.
I
don't
think
think there's a problem with that.
with duels, I think for a lot of beginners, especially if they've never played and they're just spectators, I don't think they get the point. I don't think they see what's so special about it. I think with CTF, when you have a really cool flag cap, or maybe with TDM, where somebody swoops in to get the power up or something like that and just goes through a crazy rampage, I think it's very easy to see, like, oh wow, that's amazing. With the duel, my experience has been with people who have shown demos or tried to get into the game. They don't see it. They don't get it. Do you know does that make any sense? Like, it just doesn't click. To them, it just looks like a space shooter where you're randomly, constantly shooting out rockets and lasers. Like, they don't see the resource control, the resource management. They don't see kind of the positioning or the aiming as well.
But they do see the sick frags, and that's the key. I mean, there's going to be people that understand the game, but then there's going to be people that see the sick frags, and the sick frags are what are going to draw people in. When you see a sick air rocket, or you slide backwards, flick rail somebody, and you frag them, and then when the Gibbs system gets put in, the Gore system, somebody's body slices in half. Like, duel has the capability to draw in players, and I think it needs to stay.
Well, here's the thing. You're right. I agree with you. But let's look. I find that a lot of people play, games with their friends. They have their private Discord or their Steam group, and they usually play as a stack. The thing with Duel is that your stack is separated into dual partners basically. Whereas if you have like a real team mode and there's three of you, okay, you queue up as a party of three or a party of four or a party of five, and just more people playing together is more fun. That's just the reality. Like
No,
that's you know what I'm saying?
but see, and I agree with you, but I'm saying that they can coexist. Like I don't understand why one has to be the focus and one has to be, you know, relegated to just fun mode. Like they can coexist. We can
Oh,
have dual tournaments and we can have team mode tournaments. Like, I don't see any.
because you just don't see any other games in esports that's successful
Well,
with multiple
yeah, but
modes,
well,
right?
but see, the, the games that are successful don't have the type of game mechanics that make dual work. Quake is the only game out there that has the mechanics that makes a dual mode actually work. So just because Overwatch can't do it, or PUBG can't do it, or Fortnite can't do it, or Counter Strike can't do it, well, that's just because those games don't have the mechanics that support dual. Quake does, and so that's why Quake has an edge because we can do the team shit, and we've got dual. See, look at it as a an added benefit, a a genetic um a genetic advantage that Quake has that other people don't have.
But
Like being able to run faster. Like we have more speed than you do, so we can jump higher. Like we have an extra arm, so that means we can juggle three things and you can only juggle two. Like look at it from that perspective as dual being something that Quake can do and you can't. That's what I think about dual.
no, I agree with you. I would just not make it a competitive mode. I think you can, even if it is a competitive game, I don't think you have to dumb it down, in the sense when I say to relegate it into I just wouldn't really host like major lands and stuff for it. I would really just focus on one mode, and I'd make that the 5v5 or 4v4 mode. I think that'd be more fun because you can just get more people into it. Um, yeah, I agree with you, but I think there are still considerations when you think about like a rocket launcher, for example, like its splash radius, its speed, its knockback. When you are focusing on just the team mode and you are focusing on dual and then you are focusing on dual and a team mode, I think you will have three kinds of rocket launchers or at least two kinds. Because I think every time you can make some sort of consideration for dual in addition or just by itself, there's a way in which the weapons the dual mode isn't as much fun when the weapons are as strong as you can see in something like Quake World, but the team modes are a lot more fun when you have really strong weapons. It seems like, again, when you look at Quake World to VQ3, I think this is like what do you call it? This is the scale of potential changes. I'm sure there's way more, but this is the reasonable scale of potential, in terms of weapon strength and stuff. And I find Quake World strengths are its team play aspects because of the way the weapons are designed, and its duel really isn't as I don't really find Quake World duel particularly interesting to play or to watch. And I find the reverse is true for me for VQ3. I enjoy like watching VQ3 duel, but VQ3 team modes I find them quite boring, to be honest. But that's my
We'll have to agree to disagree on
Yeah, that's okay. I don't know if there's any other question.
I don't see any other questions.
Well, Death, thank you for taking the past 2.5 to 3 hours to talk to me. I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to be saving the VOD. You're more than welcome to save it as well. It's probably going to sound better on your side than it does on mine because I have a really shitty setup. But thank you very much, and that's the end of the podcast.